Good evening, folks. We'll go ahead and get started. We have a quorum of the board up here. Just for your information, Chris Weigert is excused this evening, so I will be chairing tonight's meeting. So this is a public meeting of the School Board of West Bend Joint School District Number 1. More than 24 hours prior to the meeting, notice of the time, place, date, and subject matter of this meeting was posted at the entrance doors at the Education Service Center and at the West Bend Community Memorial Library. A copy was also sent to the Daily News, WIBD, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and other media sources that have requested notice of our meetings. I'd ask the superintendent to confirm that this meeting was properly noticed.
Yes, it was.
Thank you. Please rise for our Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Our first order of business this evening is to approve our agenda as published. Is there any discussion on the agenda?
I think based on the number of comment cards we have tonight, we'll probably go over our 30-minute policy on time frame. So I would move to approve the agenda with the exception of allowing for all public comments tonight.
Okay, and at the moment we've got 15 comment cards, so we're looking at 45 minutes, give or take, a little bit on the transition time. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tani. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you. At this point, we are going to take a moment and do a little bit of recognition of a key contributor for the district who will be saying sayonara at the end of the month. We would like to recognize Lee Lumens. Lee, if you'd like to come up front, we're going to embarrass you a little bit. So the school board would like to recognize Lee this evening. Lee is retiring after working in the West Bend School District since 2004 as the database coordinator for our Skyward student information system. Several of Lee's colleagues shared some words of recognition for Lee with the board that we would like to share with you all this evening. Lee is the wizard behind the scenes when it comes to our Skyward student database. During her time in the district, Lee has supported thousands of staff members, parents, and students as she is the main contact for any issues or help needed with Skyward when someone contacts the technology department. Lee was hired to help launch the Skyward system in the district. This included creating an entirely new electronic gradebook and a complete revamp of the district's state reporting system. Since that time, Lee has been instrumental in adjusting to changes within the technology department. She has spearheaded the efforts to integrate data in Skyward Student with other systems the district utilizes. She has supported and moved the district through a multitude of changes in Wisconsin state reporting processes while constantly supporting the ever-changing aspects of Skyward. Lee's position has changed immensely over the course of her time with the district, and she has been a model of adaptability, always being willing to learn new technological integrations, programs, and processes. Each year, Lee has been instrumental in supporting our families as they complete the information verification process, setting up new Skyward family accounts, and programming Skyward with the state's litany of annual updates. More recently, she has also been instrumental in supporting all of the data needs related to COVID-19, including family surveys, instructional option selection, and daily attendance data. She has also worked closely with our district registrar to move our new student enrollment process to a digital format within Skyward. Besides Lee's work with Skyward, she is always willing to help out and be a team player in supporting any work that needs to be completed. During the pandemic, Lee stepped up and helped organize, distribute, and collect hotspots and Chromebooks for our students. She is always willing to go above and beyond, working nights and weekends when needed to support our students and staff. The school board would like to thank you, Lee, for your dedicated service to our students, our staff, and our community of the West Bend School District. You will be greatly missed. We wish you all the best in your well-earned retirement. Congratulations. Next up on our agenda, we have our first student reports of the school year. So we will begin with East. It's always ladies before gentlemen, right? So we'd like to call up from East High School, Alexis Gugliotti.
Hello. Hello, is that working? This one? Okay. Hello, I'm Alexis Gugliotti, and I'm a senior at East High School. Since the last board meeting, there have been many things going on within the student body. For athletics, we have Tommy Conklin, who has worked hard during his cross-country season to earn a spot to go to state. He proudly represented East, placing 33rd of 187 with a time of 16:46 to finish his season. This was his second time going to state. The swim team has also been working very hard and has started advancing towards state, two of the girls being Bryn Bauer and Mara McDonald, who are both seniors from East. They both swam in sectionals. Coming up this month, basketball for both the boys and girls will be starting up within the next 2 weeks alongside the boys swim team and boys wrestling. East NHS and Student Council have also been busy. On Saturday 6th, East NHS completed a service project where they helped alongside a few other groups to clean up the stretch of highway dedicated to Mr. Engelking, who was a former West Social Studies teacher who lost his life this past spring. And they've also been busy making important decisions for their busy month of December. The Student Council has also been working hard to plan for one of the most important events of the school year. They've been busy planning for the blood drive on December 8th, which is open to the community this year. All right, that's it.
Thank you so much. Hard to believe we're talking basketball season starting up already. And for West High School, we'd like to call up Raymond Spores.
Hello, I am Raymond Spores, and I'm a senior at West High School. October has been a very busy month for West Athletics. On October 30th, the boys varsity cross-country team, as well as Sarah Raymer from the girls varsity team, represented West Bend West at the WIAA state cross-country meet. The boys team finished 15th overall in the Division I race, and Sarah Raymer also finished well, placing 98th overall in the Division I girls race. The girls swim team attended their sectional this past Saturday, finishing 5th as a team. Lily Inkman, Maddie Rummel, and Nicole Walters qualified for state and individual events, the 500 freestyle, diving, and the 100 butterfly respectively. And the 400 freestyle relay team, consisting of Mara McDonald, Ashley Jankowski, Nicole Walters, and Lily Inkman, will also be heading to state. The state swim meet will be in Waukesha South Natatorium on November 13th. The West Dance team competed in Hortonville this past Saturday. They finished first in pom, first in hip hop, and third in football routine. The dance team's next competition will be on December 4th in Ashwaubenon. The West volleyball team's season ended on October 23rd in the regional finals versus Manitowoc Lincoln. Congratulations on a great season. In the next 2 weeks, West Winter Sports will be kicking off. Events for girls and boys basketball, girls and boys hockey, and boys swim are all on the West Athletics calendar this month. In other news, West Bend West senior Lexi Williams was the current electric company superhero of the week on 1250 WSSP AM the week of October 30th. Lexi is the president of West NHS. She also competes in tennis, FBLA, track, and basketball. Over the past weekend, West NHS also, as well as several other groups, participated in a highway cleanup in Kewaskum to honor the late Mr. Engelking, organized by Mr. Ralph. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Raymond. And Alexis, thank you, and congratulations to all our student athletes on their achievements, and we look forward to what's going to happen for the winter sports coming up, so thank you. This brings us to our public participation portion of the agenda. Easy for me to say. We know the drill, but I'm gonna read the announcement all the same. We've come to the public participation portion of the agenda. Board Policy 187 prescribes the nature and procedures for this segment. I summarize the policy at this time, but copies of the policy are available in the back of the room, and I urge you to familiarize yourself with the policy in its entirety. Residents of the district, parents of children in district schools, and employees of the district may participate. Participants desiring to address the board should obtain and complete a participant comment card near the entry and turn it over to the president prior to the meeting or when allowed by the president. Participants may comment concerning an agenda item or a non-agenda item. Each participant will be called to the podium and given 3 minutes to speak. The participant must state his or her name and relation to the district. This information will appear in the minutes of the meeting. The board will not engage in debate concerning the remarks or take immediate action. The board may refer the matter to the superintendent, a committee, or take the remarks into consideration in future action. Board Policy 872 provides a formal process for citizen complaints, and Board Policy 520 provides a formal process for employee complaints. The board recommends use of these procedures as they guarantee a fair and timely response. I will invite participants to speak. There will be a visible timer to help manage your time. And given the number of participants, we're now up to 16, I will also alert speakers as to who is on deck so we can move efficiently. And to help us move efficiently and ensure that all participants are heard, please refrain from conversation, comment, or applause during or after public participation comments, please. So with that, I will call up Jenny Thompson as our first speaker, and on deck will be Bill Schultz.
Hi, guys. This one? Okay. Hi, I'm Jenny Thompson. I'm a resident of West Bend. I have 2 kids in the district. Thank you for giving us the time to speak tonight, and thank you guys also for all the work you've been doing. I attended the curriculum committee meeting last week, and there were 3 things that stood out to me. First, I heard at the meeting that SEL will also be taught during counseling time in grades K through 4. So it's now being taught twice. Parents need to be aware that if they opt their kid out of SEL, then they also need to opt them out of counseling sessions. Tonight, hopefully part of your discussion can be where these kids will be going once opting out. Same goes for all kids in all grades opting out. Where are they going? Do you have a staff member to watch them? Will the school be providing an opt-out form? Do kids in 6th, 7th, and 8th also have SEL built in the counseling time? If so, how can we opt out of that as well? Second, it was stated during the curriculum meeting that second step student slideshows cannot be edited or modified. Tonight, can part of your discussion be what that will look like then? If a parent has a problem with one of the slides, but maybe wants their child to learn that soft skill being taught, do they now have to opt their child completely out of that lesson? Can the entire slideshow be removed, and can a supplemental handout be put in instead? What about human error? What if a slide is supposed to be skipped over because you as a board voted it to be, but it accidentally gets taught? What happens then? Do parents get an email from the teacher or counselor stating it was accidentally taught? Third, one of the handouts from the curriculum committee meeting was a spreadsheet discussing all the issues the community found with Second Step. In columns, it lists community feedback, feedback theme, recommendation, and additional information. In one of the many lessons, the community found anti-family undertones. The notes under additional information, which was written by some West Bend School District staff member, reads, many of the anti-family concerns do not consider the fact that the lessons are being taught at school with the context of many school-based activities and situations. Suggestions are more applicable to school and social experiences. This right here is exactly what we've been saying for 2 months and is our greatest fear realized. This is proof that even district sees what we see. These lessons are to teach children that their parents cannot relate to them, only their friends and teachers can. If these lessons, like the staff member says, are supposed to be school-based and not family-based, then why are so many lessons disparaging to the family unit in the first place? The answer is crystal clear. Second Step wants to teach children that what their parents say doesn't matter. It wants to teach beliefs and ideals with no concern for what the parents actually believe in. Second Step is systematically removing the parent from the equation. Please remove Second Step and find another program to teach SEL. No one is saying that that will be an easy task, but it will be worth it for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Bill Schultz, and on deck is Marianne Rathke.
Hello everyone, my name is Bill Schultz. My 4th grade son is in Miss Fider's 4th grade classroom at Jackson Elementary School. Tonight I'm here to discuss the COVID-19 mitigation policy. Recently, my son's classroom moved into phase 4 of the COVID-19 mitigation policy, which has been brought to my attention how there are obvious flaws. This COVID-19 mitigation policy is based on a classroom-to-classroom basis, or if they are moved into any phase outside of phase 1, that classroom must wear masks, while none of the other kids that are in phase 2, 3, or 4 must wear a mask. That is teaching kids that segregation is okay starting in the classroom. Not only that, but my 9-year-old child, has been bullied because of these very policies that have been put into place. My son has handled the bullying as he has been taught by myself. Covering students and teachers' faces alike is detrimental to not only their physical, but their mental and their emotional health, as well as it hinders their ability to learn effectively. Seeing people's facial expressions, the tone in their voice, and the words that come out of their mouth has been proven time and time again how it is an integral part of their learning. This comply or die, comply or stay home policy will not be tolerated. It must change. Families like myself depend on having 2 incomes. My child is either forced to wear a mask while he's at school or he must stay home. Why? Because he's perfectly healthy? Doesn't make any sense to me. I'm going to hit you with a couple of facts here. In the state of Wisconsin, there's been 4 children under the age of 10 that have died of or with COVID. In the entire United States, under the age of 18, 680 deaths, all of which have had prior comorbidities and underlying health concerns. These two policies do not have our children's best interests at hand. We, the people, must elect board members who feel the same. These policies... Hold on one second here. These new policies must be implemented that don't affect my child's mental, physical, or emotional health, as well as take away his God-given right to breathe. And it shall not be impeded by being forced to comply to wear a mask and a facial covering. This is completely unconstitutional. Now, I must ask everyone in the room, who is with me? Who does not agree with these policies and who thinks that these policies should change? This is not what America stands for. We, the people, and the parents of the future of this very country and this nation need a change. We need more options. There are other school districts around us, Slinger, Hartford, Kewaskum, and Richfield, that have policies that align with this. I will end in this. This is America, land of the free, home of the brave, USA.
Thank you, Bill. Marianne Rathke is next up, and on deck is Leanna Dracono. And Marianne, it shows that you are a resident of the district and a grandparent.
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi,
Thank you.
my name is Marianne Rathke. My address has been provided. I've attended previous school board meetings. I and my family and friends have been staying informed with the parents group and have objections to SEL and the school board's response. I also have grandchildren in the West Bend School District, kindergarten and first grade, or K4 and first grade. So they're affected because you still kept SEL from kindergarten to 3rd grade. A parent group has pointed out many ways that SEL deceptively includes racial and sexual stereotyping, as well as indoctrination to political activism. They also point out many SEL techniques undermining parent authorities. I have heard in past school board meetings that the teachers' SEL training includes seminars that suggest they are being indoctrinated to CRT tenets. The curriculum committee has been tinkering with SEL classes by noting the objectable parts will be removed. Why would any program that needs to be modified or for objectable material, why would we keep that? There is no way that you can assure that CRT tenets are not being waived or weaved in, or taught in classrooms by teachers with any kind of policy to prevent it. I suggest that you adopt the following Representative Gundrum's policies or Assembly Bill 411. The policy should prohibit teaching of any racial and sexual stereotyping, as well as teaching of any political indoctrination. It also needs teacher accountability by providing the violation of the policies will have consequences. Do the right thing for the West Bend students. Remove SEL. We all know it's bad. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Leanna Dracono, and on deck is Marcia Bailey. Leanna, it says here that you are a resident of Jackson.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
My name is Leanna Dracono, and I'm a homeowner in the district. Over the last few meetings, we've heard a number of speakers both for and against SEL. On the side of vetoing it for a better, less controversial form of emotional education that meets the same needs, we have concerned citizens of all walks of life and professions, grandparents, parents, county representatives, and more, including statements written by educators in the district who are against Second Step but do not feel free to publicly say so. And then we have the side in favor, which is made up almost exclusively of teachers in the district. The last 2 meetings, I sat back and watched teacher after teacher after teacher get up and speak in favor of this second step SEL. I waited for parents or citizens not employed or formerly employed by this district to show up and show their approval. None did. That for me was very telling. It speaks volumes about who the citizens are in this community who agree with this. A lot of employees of the district. I find it very strange how many union members, including the president and vice president, spoke in favor of this. Their constant stance is the union has no say in what curriculum is used. So why are they here speaking to sway the discussion on what curriculum is used? Is that not a contradiction and a conflict of interests? Their opinions on SEL are not an accurate representation of Washington County residents at all. I also wanted to address the district being so dead set on using second step and only second step. You have found totally inappropriate and suspect lessons throughout the curriculum and chose to sift through them, block some, remove others, and piece together the good parts instead of scrapping the whole program in favor of something far less controversial. Many citizens have sent viable, better choices to you for review, so there isn't a need to pick through and salvage lessons from second step. Yet these other options have been completely ignored. You just keep doubling down on the second step, even though many parents are disturbed and concerned about many of its features and origins. This alienates a great many of your district's parents, so much so that children have been pulled from the classes and some from the entire school district. So more division. The white privilege training that is being introduced is incredibly divisive. If there is racism within the district, surely fighting it with more racism is not the answer. We can't throw fire on top of fire and think any extinguishing is going to happen. As we have seen at the high school, teachers dividing students even more with race ends in chaos and violence. No equity training, no SEL. We can find way better solutions than this, or we aren't even trying. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanna. Next up is Marietta Bailey, and on deck is Chris Bossert. Marietta, it shows that you are an employee and a grandparent in the district.
Yes. My name is Marietta Bailey. I am an employee of the West Bend School District and a grandparent of 3 West Bend students. I know that children are going through troubling times. They have witnessed the most politically divided and divisive times in the last few years. They are being filled with propaganda every day by a corrupt media. They are being forced to wear masks and indoctrinated with the narrative that COVID will kill them and the ones they love unless they wear a mask and get vaccinated. They are also being indoctrinated with the narrative that America is a horrible and systemically racist country and white people, conservatives, and those who disagree them are a problem. With suicide, drug addiction, and depression on the rise, we agree kids need more mental health care. We are asking for that. The problem is the SEL program being used is rooted in division and has critical race theory hidden in it. Members of this community have proven this by looking at the lessons. The fact that certain lessons and parts of this curriculum are being removed and modified is also proof. With FOIA requests, it has also been proven that this school district has put its teachers through seminars and training related to CRT. Why are we using a curriculum where lessons need to be removed or modified because of these issues? I do thank Jen Wimmer, the curriculum committee, and this school board for working with us on this issue. We are not saying that this school district and the teachers are purposely indoctrinating our children to Marxism. What we have found is this curriculum has these ideologies in it. I am not extreme, ignorant, have a narrow view, I'm not a racist. I have the right to voice my concerns without being labeled and attacked. I am a concerned grandparent and employee who wants to help our students with the curriculum that actually helps them without indoctrinating them with an ideology that is un-American and racist. Thank you.
Thank you, Marietta. Next up is Chris Bossert, and on deck is Karin Merkel. And Chris, it says that you are a resident and an elected official.
Yep.
Go ahead. Thank you.
All right, Chris Bossert, County Board Supervisor. You may recall about a year to a year and a half ago, we passed an advisory resolution in which we pledged to protect the constitutional rights of all our constituents. Chief among those is the First Amendment. A lot of us know the First Amendment as focusing on free speech, but it actually protects 5 rights, including the freedom of press, of religion, the freedom of assembly, and most importantly tonight, the freedom to petition the government for redress of grievances, which is a really fancy way of saying the freedom to complain to government. The National School Boards Association has decided to attack our First Amendment rights. They asked the FBI to treat constituents and parents as domestic terrorists simply for exercising their right to petition the government for redress of grievances. This is a clear intent to try to interfere with constituents who try to utilize their First Amendment rights. Now, in truth, if any constituent were to ever go too far, our local authorities are well equipped to deal with it. Our police chief and our county sheriff have a lot of experience in dealing with protecting people's First Amendment rights and protecting government officials. So, I'm going to put in a request today. I'm asking you to craft and pass an advisory resolution that does 3 things. First, affirms your commitment, the commitment of this board, to protecting our First Amendment rights. Second, admonish the National School Board Association for referring to constituents as domestic terrorists. And third, pledge to refer any concerns about constituent behavior to the West Bend Police and the Washington County Sheriffs and not involve the FBI unless they, as professionals, view it as appropriate. So I'm calling on you, Nancy Justman, to pass this. I'm calling on you, Paul Fisher, to pass this. I'm calling on you, Aaron Dove, to pass this. I'm calling on Kurt Rebels and Joel Ungert and Tony Schmidt to pass this. And I'm calling on Chris Swigert, who is not here tonight, to craft a resolution, put it on the agenda for all of you to vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Next up is Karin Merkel, and on deck is Monica Hafenbradel. I hope I got that right. Karin, it says here that you are a student and obviously resident of the district.
Yes, I am. Good evening. Thank you for letting us all speak tonight. I would like to start off by saying that we need to be able to compromise on the 7th and 8th grade curriculum. After reviewing most of the SEL curriculum, I found numerous instances of anti-family values and controversial topics that could be brought up in the classroom. I would be more than willing to list all of them. However, I will only be speaking about a few due to the time limit. The first one I found was from the 8th grade curriculum. It's in Unit 1, Lesson 5. In this particular lesson, it talks about positive and negative factors in your life. Listed in the positive factors are friends and teachers. Now, I agree that friends and teachers are positive factors, but who is left out of that list? Parents. I personally would consider my parents to be a positive factor in my life, and I know that many of my friends would also agree with me. Furthermore, in the 7th grade curriculum, Unit 1, Lesson 3, and the 4th activity, in this activity, the teacher has the students make social media accounts and/or websites. Except, nowhere in this lesson does it ever state that you should only make them with your parents' permission. In the last board meeting, I also mentioned the same instance in the 8th grade curriculum. Social media is again mentioned in Unit 1 in 7th grade. This is becoming repetitive, and this could create tension between parents and their children after school while at home. Another example of negative views of parents is again in Unit 1. This instant is from Lesson 4 in the 4th activity. This lesson talks about a family and their son and how his parents think he's too young for the responsibility. This isn't even the first mention of family in Unit 1, and it's negative. Right after this activity, students are asked about who or what their roadblocks are. The first thing that might come to their mind is parents, since that is what the whole activity was about. Do you want family arguments to stem from these lessons. I would also like to bring up something else to everyone's attention. At the last meeting, board member Kurt Rebels had stated, I would like us to look into an alternative SEL curriculum. Kurt, I agree with you. I believe SEL could be a positive thing to have in schools, but using Second Step as the resource for these lessons is not what we want. With that, I ask the board to vote on finding an alternative resource for SEL when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. Next up is Monica Hafenbradel, and on deck is Lauren Bailey. And Monica, it says that here that you are a resident and an employee of the district.
Yes, hi, my name is Monica Hafenbrettel. I am a resident. I'm a graduate of West High School, and I'm recently an employee of the West Bend School District. Over the summer, Jen hosted some Zoom calls where you could call and ask questions, voice your concerns, and just have a conversation one-on-one with her. I called in and I had questions about the COVID mitigation plan. She answered all of my questions very well. And she also mentioned that there was some positions available at the school district, especially the elementary school level, for a sanitization, a custodial position where the main focus is to sanitize all surfaces that are high-touch surfaces in the school. Looked into that position, I applied, and I got the job. I've been working since mid-September here at the school district. But over the last week, we have seen so many students and staff out of our building because they are getting sick. What I am doing to protect our kids from COVID is not enough. And I will give you some reasons and examples of things we can do to help and step up our game even farther from somebody who sees it firsthand every day. One thing we need in our elementary schools, I'm not going to mention which school I work for because I want to protect my students' privacy mostly. But we have this cool machine called a Clorox 360 sprayer, and basically it's this thing you plug in and then you can sanitize everything floor to ceiling. It's pretty awesome. The problem is we have one to share with the elementary schools and Silverbrook. We have one. We're supposed to sanitize a classroom when there's a positive case. How can we do that if we have to wait 2 days to get that sprayer? We need more in our classrooms. We need one per building. We need to use them daily so we can get on top of this. Because right now, we are being reactive. We need to be proactive. Another thing we can do is encourage hand sanitizing, especially as children enter common spaces, such as the lunchroom, the music room, the library. Those places are used for everybody. Kids come and go all day long, especially in the cafeteria. You know, there's no mask wearing at all because they're all eating lunch. It's very dangerous. Kids are getting sick. Kids are sitting 5 and 6 to a bench on those lunch tables, so close to each other, and they're spreading germs like crazy. So please take this into consideration. I hope you understand that I'm seeing this firsthand. I'm not making this up, and it's getting very dangerous for our students. So I'd like you to look at the plans and supply us with what we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Next up is Lauren Bailey, and on deck is Audrey Brown. Lauren, it says here that you are a resident of the district. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Parent and grandparent of West Bend students. I believe that I speak for a large number of conservative, hardworking, tax-paying families living in the West Bend area. My wife and I have lived here for 43 years and raised 4 children here attending West Bend schools. We've been to countless school orchestra, choir concerts, sporting events, musical productions. We've attended parent-teacher conferences spanning more than 20 years. And we're blessed to have grandchildren in the school. We've always been very involved in our children's education. We have followed school board and administration decisions presented in school communications, as well as the local newspaper. The reason you've never heard from many of us before is because we have never seen such racist, Marxist, sexually explicit, and offensive material before being presented to our children. I have spoken with countless neighbors and friends who feel the same. They, like us, have never felt the need to express their displeasure with the program until now. Somebody really snuck this one in here without our knowledge. Even a school board member here present recently asked, when was this program started? If board members are unaware of the makeup of our curriculum, how are we parents to find out? Please consider what happened in the Virginia gubernatorial election last week. The well-known candidate who was leading by a large margin made the mistake of announcing that parents have no right to dictate to schools what they should teach. That became his tagline. The unexpected winner and inexperienced underdog simply dwelled on that one message. Parents do have the right to control what their children are taught. And then consider, as already was mentioned, the tremendous criticism felt by U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland after he sent a memo to the Justice Department to investigate parents at school board meetings as domestic terrorists. To be fair, Superintendent Wimmer and school board members have met with some of our citizens regarding the content of these programs. Some changes and eliminations have been promised. We thank you for that. There are still areas that are unacceptable to us in the SEL for 7th and 8th grade particularly. And by the way, I don't think it's enough to just say we won't teach this or that particular chapter or lesson or even page of that lesson, because that provides no assurance that an individual teacher may, accidentally or on purpose, might present that material anyway. If an offensive lesson cannot be removed from the program, I'm afraid the entire program should not be used. Perhaps SEL could be replaced with a non-biased mental health program. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Lauren. Next up is Audrey Brown, and on deck is Dan Brown. And Audrey, it says here that you are a student.
Yes.
Thank you for speaking this evening.
Yeah, thank you for listening. Hello, my name is Audrey, and I'm an 8th grade student at Badger Middle School. I maintain a 4.0 GPA while doing 20 hours a week of extracurricular and volunteer work. I bring this up because I believe it shows my education and what I'm being taught matters to me. I've listened to previous school board meetings about SEL, and I would like to talk about my experience with it today. I believe everyone here agrees that we all want kids to learn kindness, compassion, empathy, and how to be respectful. The West Bend School District's SEL curriculum does not focus on these things. It had lessons with links to tell me I can and should have casual sex at the age of 13, and if I get pregnant, go to Planned Parenthood for resources. What does that have to do with bullying or stress management? According to the West Bend School District website, social emotional learning through counselor connection has been going far back as 2014. So all current high schoolers could have potential exposure while in the intermediate or middle school. I've heard a lot of the high school students' testimonies of how they have endured harassment and awful things being said to them even with SEL. This absolutely breaks my heart, of course, that this is their experience. But how can we expect SEL to help if they are experiencing harassment and awful things said to them even with this program? But here's my experience at Badger. Less than 6 months ago, at the end of the school year, I had my life threatened by another student. He was telling everyone how to bypass the security on our school Chromebooks and told me I would not wake up in the morning if I told anyone. I believe he singled me out because I am a rule follower. This student is the son of not one, but 2 West Bend School District employees. Both have gone through the SEL training. Also, both of them have come up about and spoken about the importance of SEL at previous school board meetings. But I believe actions speak louder than words. So tell me, how well does this SEL curriculum work when 2 trained employees who are supposed to teach it to other children couldn't teach their own child these values? When this occurred, I went to the vice principal, and she said she would that she would take the matter seriously. Although he admitted to what he said, he told her it was a joke, so repercussions were not given. All the SEL teaching in the world won't fix issues of bullying and harassment if those adults we are supposed to turn to and trust us choose to do nothing about it. My parents taught me that my decisions and choices make an impact, and I'm the one held accountable for the income. So this all comes down to accountability. Who should be held accountable? You, the school board, heard for not properly looking at this curriculum. School staff that had nothing to that did nothing when the issues are brought to them, kids who behave in degrading and cruel ways. I believe it's all of the above. Thank you for this time. Find a different program that actually teaches morals and values of compassion and integrity.
Thank you, Audrey. Next up is Dan Brown, and on deck is John Donaldson. Dan, it says here that you're a parent, obviously.
Yes, obviously. I appreciate you letting us all speak. I apologize, I don't have anything written down to speak to you from, but I did want to come up here and tell you I strongly oppose the second step SEL program. I was very disappointed last school board meeting when you guys reinstituted the 4K through 6th grade program. I know we're just discussing it this evening for the 7th and 8th grade program, but I hope that you all vote properly and keep this program out of our district. I'd like to just continue to echo a lot of what my fellow parents have had to say. It seems like everyone that's come up in support of this program has either been an administrator or a student who has already had this program in the school board by your own admission for, I think, 7 to 10 years is what you said. It was before a lot of you were even on this board is what you said. I think it was back in September you admitted to that. And yet you wanted to reinstitute it because you're talking about how our kids are screwed up and that they needed a program to get them back in line. Well, guess what? If you follow rules and if you hold people accountable and if you institute consequences for negative behavior, students will get in line. What I hear a lot of is people swearing in the hallways, calling each other racist words. If you want to stop that, have consequences for it. If a student acts out, make sure they are reprimanded. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Next up is John Donaldson, and on deck is Melanie Ergot. And John, it says here that you are a parent and resident of the district.
Correct. Hi, my name's John. I'd like to reflect on some key points that I've heard regarding CRT and SEL. Inclusion, equality, handling situations in ways that we can teach our kids to handle situations with fairness and kindness. As for all of you who support CRT, or any form of it, have stated you want your children to learn these skills, correct? As you teach them these skills or fight for them, you are also teaching another skill, hypocrisy. You cry for inclusion and diversity and then turn around and treat our kids as outcasts as they have to sit in the hallways by themselves or in other areas from friends because as long as you get your way, then the rest of the kids don't matter. Does that sound about right? I opted my kids out because I no longer trust the schools to do the right thing, to stay within the guidelines and of the approved curriculum. We have seen this already this year with rogue teachers inserting ideologies in tests and questions within assignments. I always wondered how schools and staff members can react the way that they do as I watch a gross overreach of the schools, forcing my kids to watch the one-sided biased news outlet like CNN. When I emailed the principal, Lance, regarding this, he reacted very quick, immediately pulling my child from class, have him sit alone in the hallway. Is this the type of inclusion you guys are looking for? My son immediately texted me, said he has to sit in the class alone in the hallway, and I was so furious. Is this what we can look forward to when we opt our kids out of SEL classes? Singling children out, bullied, being shamed, sitting in the hallways. Here's some facts for you. 7 states have already banned the teaching of SEL and CRT in their schools because they have actually listened to the facts and listened to the concerns of the parents. 16 other states are currently moving forward in state legislature, including Wisconsin. Schools are not here to give staff a free pass on teaching our children the values that they agree with. That is what created forced ideologies and division, not diversity in a community. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next up is Melanie Ergot, and on deck is Costa Murdis. And Melanie, it says here that you are a parent and resident of the district as well.
Yes. I'm Melanie Ergot. I am a parent of 5 and a taxpayer in the district. I am opposed to Second Step. I think I can speak for most of us that education on the importance of kindness and mental health should absolutely be made available for those that need it. I commend you for agreeing to remove some of the 7th and 8th grade lessons from the curriculum. And I'm glad that you were able to see the big problems and inappropriate content being woven throughout the lessons. I urge you, however, to completely remove all of the second step curriculum for all grades. Let me give you a scenario. Imagine that your elementary child has a friend at school. Your child begins to spend time at that friend's house and with their family. The parents seem really nice. They play ball with them, take them to movies, and order them pizza, and they also attend church services regularly. Everything seems great. It is later brought to your attention that they are also having large parties where there are people drinking heavily and smoking marijuana when your child is present. Your child also tells you that there is pornography lying around where kids can see it. Do you continue to allow your child to be influenced by this family and spend time there? Do you simply ignore these inappropriate situations because they also play ball and attend church regularly? Or do you begin to question the character of these parents and second guess those play dates? For me, I would absolutely not allow it to continue. I am the gatekeeper of my home, and I choose what I will allow to influence my kids. I can find other people in my community that I trust to influence my children. Heck, I can influence them myself. I understand that it may be inconvenient to change an entire curriculum, but by keeping parts of it in the classroom, you are allowing bad influence to corrupt good character. It is absolutely necessary to completely remove it on all levels. Several weeks ago, I felt it necessary to pull all of my children from the district. We will not be returning to the public schools. It is shameful that my child will no longer be offered special education services. Shameful that a decision like that would even have to be made. But as a mother, it is my job to protect their hearts, and I cannot trust a district with my greatest gifts that does not take parents' concerns seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Next up is Costa Murdis, and on deck is Karin Frene. And Krista, it says here that you're a resident with 4 children in West Bend schools.
Yep. I've been so sad thinking about what the students who spoke at the last school board meeting have been going through. We heard student after student talking about the racism, fights in the hallways, things like that going on. All the students spoke about the racism, and it makes me so sick to know that there are kids who use those horrible words as weapons at school. I started thinking about SEL. It's been taught to all of those kids, as some others have mentioned tonight. We think as far back as 2014 per the FOIA documents received and as we've talked about in previous school board meetings. So these kids have learned the ways of SEL for the past 7 years or so. SEL has had the chance to solve the problems and it hasn't. The kids that spoke on that school board Monday prove that. The answer is not more SEL. The answer may be more mental health classes or hiring more psychologists or more therapists or social workers. There may be other answers. The answer may be giving more power to the teachers and administrators to establish consequences for the kids and their abusive words. SEL has been teaching the kids for over 7 years, and now they're in the high schools, and they're showing us by their behavior in the high school what it has made them. Some of the kids that spoke in the last school board meeting mentioned they were lucky enough to learn SEL traits at home. And look at how amazing they turned out. A lot of them had really great speeches. They carried themselves well. They're well-rounded, wonderful kids who spoke their minds and they stood up for what they believe in. What about the kids that learned SEL traits in school for the last 7 years or more? Are they the ones who are giving the racial slurs in the hallways at school? They've turned into bullies that use racial slurs and emotionally and mentally hurt others at school. Please consider shelving SEL or second step for the time being and focusing on helping the kids by increasing discipline and adding more possibly mental health classes or additional ways to help the children. We know that it's not just teaching kids to be kind and nice human beings. Obviously, there's some other emotional issues. People have suicidal ideations who you wouldn't even suspect. So maybe there needs to be more resources. Some people don't feel comfortable telling their parents, and we get that. But then provide the resources for them. I thought that's what the $250,000 grant was for. Instead, we invested in a program of CRT. So once that's done and our schools are healthy, bringing in a SEL class, probably not second step, that wouldn't be ideal since it's so controversial, that might actually work for the kids. But skipping straight to just more SEL classes will probably further damage and divide them, especially any form of SEL coming from second step. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Krista. Next up is Karin Frene, and on deck is Jill Valiser. Karin, it says here that you are a parent and resident of the district.
I am.
Okay,
and I
thank you.
apologize. My kids passed me a little cold, so my voice is a little hoarse today. So my name is Karin Frene, and I hope you all had a chance to review the email I sent you all regarding the Children's Hospital of Wisconsin K-12 e-learning mental health program called Shine Through and Act Now. This program, developed by the Children's Hospital Health Department and Medical College of Wisconsin, is data-driven and evidence-based. Please ask administration for this program to be looked into for future district use. I think it's a valuable resource for us. Children's Hospital has stated recently that 20% of children ages 5 to 17 have a diagnosable mental health disorder, and 80% of those children don't receive care or treatment. That means that in our district, up to 1,000 students could need mental health care and may not be receiving it. This could be a huge factor in the disruptions going on in our schools currently. Children's also stated that because of COVID, these numbers are even higher due to social support changes, death in families, family structure changes, increased anxiety, food insecurity, potential abuse via physical, verbal, and substance, and disruption to routines and lifestyles is hard enough for kids on their own. I also want to point out the correlation between mental health and substance abuse for our children and adults. It's documented that drug addiction stems from mental health disorders or genetic predisposition. An addict's genetic predisposition is 50%. Drug use among 8th graders has increased 61% between 2016 to 2020. 86% of teenagers know someone who smokes, drinks, or does drugs during school times. And I received all these statistics from drugabusestatistics.org. 80 or 90% of suicides have an undiagnosed mental health issue attached to them. I'm a daughter of a recovered drug addict. I understand the trauma that kids go through in school. My husband and I also have 3 cousins who have suffered from opioid addiction. 2 went to WBSD, 2 have been in prison, 1 is dead from his addiction. Every single person in this room knows someone who has struggled with addiction or mental health disorders. In most instances, those disorders stem back to middle school and high school when there's time for prevention. When adults get anxious or depressed, we can identify the signs. We talk to our doctors and we take our prescribed medications. As Paul mentioned in previous meetings, kids don't always want to talk to adults. They don't know how to explain to us how they're feeling or even how to explain how they feel. If the district wants to improve social and emotional learning, let's focus on getting our teens real mental health care and lead to better emotional health. I'm sorry. I have a lot more to say if you care to hear it later.
Thank you, Karin. And our final speaker this evening is Jill Valiser. And Jill, it says here that you are a resident of the district.
That's correct. Yes. I've been to multiple school board meetings listening, and I will say I truly believe parents on both sides are desiring to do the best thing for their children, though they disagree on that, how that should come through. I agree with the warning that is being sounded that second step is created for a purpose that is not going to prove beneficial. We see a great many warnings within the curriculum, and picking and choosing parts of it is akin to eating the frosting on a cupcake filled with maggots. Yet we do see a need. How do we help these children learn to manage emotions and have self-control? How do we teach them to be kind to others? What about their future? What if they are hurt by others or they are hurting others themselves? These are not only needs of young people, but definitely for any age. We've seen people take their life, even just recently in the last week in West Bend as an adult. So this emotional health, these difficulties are real. Throughout history, it is evident that humanity is indeed created with the capability for doing wonderful things. However, we are also capable of causing great pain and despair. From many forms of slavery, both current and past, work camps, current and past, genocides, violence, murders, and so forth, down to seemingly small things like selfishness, lying, stealing, and dishonoring others. This is a sickness not to be able to be discussed and taught out through any curriculum. Though some may restrain it or manage it easier than others, and it can be eased by wise counsel and leadership, yet the root of this sickness is the human heart. To attempt to fix this actual true battle of good and evil with mere human solutions is like trying to heal cancer by putting a contaminated Band-Aid over it. Like a doctor who sees the root of a sickness, it is good and loving to offer the cure. Instead of a curriculum, I offer you a person. Over 2,000 years ago, God himself came in the likeness of a man, Jesus. While perfect and guiltless, he took the entirety of fallen humanity upon himself to rescue us from ourselves. And he stands with his hand extended to anyone willing to reach out and grasp it. What you think disqualifies is actually what qualifies you. And this offer is good news. For the depressed and hurt, Jesus carried our sorrows, if you'll release it to him. He forgave us so that we can forgive others, and he is also the one who will judge at the right time. Fear, which we've seen much of in the last couple years, he will take and give you his spirit of love, power, and sound mind. Hate, anger, he takes a heart of stone and makes it a heart of flesh. Sick, he is the healer. By his stripes we were healed. And for so many children that are confused right now, thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you to all of our speakers this evening. Appreciate your thoughts, your time putting your thoughts down on paper, and we will certainly weigh those as we continue going forwards. But this concludes the public participation portion of the meeting. We do have some other agenda items, obviously specific to the social emotional learning topic. So you're certainly free to leave, but if you'd like to stick around and observe the rest of the meeting, you're welcome to do that as well. So at this point, we come to the consent agenda, which this week we have minutes of the October 25th regular board meeting to approve, minutes of the October 25th executive session, disbursements posted through November 8th, 2021, ratification of one certified staff contract, no certified staff resignations to approve this week, and then one retirement, which we've already recognized Lee for. So any discussion on the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Nancy. We have a motion on the floor. Any final discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, the consent agenda passes. Thank you. This brings us to our report section, and leading us off will be Superintendent Wimmer with the superintendent's report.
Sure. This evening I'd like to start with COVID. We talked 2 weeks ago. We probably jinxed ourselves saying that we were seeing us kind of even out. You saw in the dashboard in our Friday update last week, there were 18 classrooms across the district operating in phase 4. We're starting the week with 16 classrooms in that phase. Recall that we have phase mitigation that's in attention to both COVID and non-COVID illness. We have that at the classroom level so that we can mitigate quickly and have least impact on more restrictive measures as we have to put those in place. So being in that phase 4 isn't taken lightly, but it did seem to come upon us quickly. Just today, there were 14 cases at Silverbrook. So when I talk about how quickly that comes upon you, we did have to move our first school. All of Silverbrook will be in phase 2, and we did target one house there because of the high number of cases for distance learning. We understand the burden that places on our families, even just personal beliefs in regards to face coverings when you enter phase 4, because those are required. Did reach out to some community resources to see if there's any options for families, because while we'll provide distance learning, again, we recognize the hardship that creates for families. They might not be able to stay home. So we are working on those things. I know we're working with Silverbrook families as they transition to a period of distance learning. If they have no plan or need some time to create their plan of care, we are sensitive to that, but we do need to move swiftly. We're again, battling illness, not just in our students, but also our staff. Just for a sense for the public, on 3 days last week, we had over 70 staff members out, 39 unfilled absences, which teachers then are picking up and subbing for each other with what would have been their prep periods. All of us are in service to our schools, whether it's serving lunch, driving a daycare route, doing all those different things. Just, again, trying to remain in person and keeping our options open for our families. So with that, just making sure if anyone can consider subbing in any capacity in our district. I know our HR department would love to hear from you. Our teachers would love the support. We've been hiring subs, snapping them up as fast as we can. But we're just, looking back, it seems to be we're in kind of that same kind of peak that we faced last year as well. So again, hoping to navigate that. We're hopeful that what we've done where we move swiftly is going to stop what we're seeing and disrupt those numbers in a positive way. So I'll just keep you informed. Any questions specifically around COVID or mitigation or what we're seeing right now, what we're navigating? Again, just for those who are watching, we do a daily dashboard that gives you information, and then we do a weekly update. That weekly update can be found. There's just a really clear COVID tab there. So we're real transparent around our numbers, what we're doing, how many classrooms we have operating in different phases. Again, commitment to move swiftly when we need to. Just to echo thanks to City Hall for giving us this space. We'll be here for this meeting and our next meeting. Our students are getting ready for performances or performing in the space at the Silver Lining Arts Center. Our boardroom doesn't have enough space to accommodate participation levels that we've seen, so we'll continue to meet here, and we thank them for hosting us. Just a reminder to our families and for board members that the Here Comes the Bus app was launched by Go Right Way. We're still loading the 4K students into the system, but that's K-12. We've sent information to families. It can be found on our website as well. To download that app, you have a unique student ID, and it lets you know in real time where your bus is, so you can, as it gets colder, probably time that run to the bus stop a little bit more closely. So encourage people to check that app out and let us know how it's working and give us some feedback as we transition to that service as well. Students of West Bend are invited to enter our Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Art, Speech, and Writing Contest that's put on by the Marcus Corporation, Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Milwaukee Brewers, We Energies. All the details for that are on our West Bend website, and I think our principals are sharing that in newsletters as well. So we'd encourage students to go for that. I know that our student reporters noted our athletes and their performance in their fall sports and representation at state. You will be formally recognizing the fall state participants at the next board meeting. We invite the kids in personally, but I just like to echo our congratulations to those teams and a good luck to our swim and dive. They're still up for competition, and thank them for their efforts and for representing West Bend in those pieces. So that's all for my report. Any questions?
Superintendent, you mentioned Go Right Way. Could you maybe give the public a quick update on, you know, we get asked, why are there buses parked up at the high school? And you know, we started a new contract with a new service provider. They needed some space, and I understand that's possibly coming to a conclusion on them using our space. Could you maybe give a quick update on that?
Sure. I think Mr. Sarno can remind me of the date real quick. They moved.
So the buses are gone.
Yep, so we were waiting on paving. They needed to get appropriate permits. They've opened up a new bus terminal and doing that. So we were waiting for their parking lot to be paved. We knew that that would be a short-term piece and that we were accommodating. So thanks everyone for kind of living with that headache of having some of those prime spaces taken up, but thankfully they've moved.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Superintendent. Next up on the report docket is our Curriculum Committee report. So Erin Dove is the Curriculum Committee Chair.
Yeah, thank you. The Curriculum Committee met on Tuesday, November 2nd. I'm not going to go into extreme detail because all of the agenda items that we spoke about at that meeting are all up for discussion tonight. So stay tuned.
Okay, any questions for Aaron? I'm sure we'll have more discussion shortly. Last report item is our disproportionality plan, and Emily Melstrand will take us through this.
All right. Is Tim in here by any chance? Oh, okay, there, it showed up. There was a pause and I panicked. All right. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to report out tonight on our disproportionality plan. I'm Emily Melstrand, I'm the Director of Student Services, and I wanted to give you a little bit of background about what this means. So the Department of Public Instruction provides oversight to ensure compliance with all state and federal regulations related to the identification of students with special education needs. And they look at all of our students as a total population, and then they look at individual subgroups within that total population. And what the Department of Public Instruction does is it reviews the data that we submit to them, giving them information about our student population, and they apply a criteria to determine whether or not districts are in the range of what would be considered proportionate in the identification of students within our whole population and within specific subgroups. And the West Bend School District was found to be over-identifying students who are Hispanic in the area of specific learning disability, primarily in the area of reading. And what that means is it really provides us an opportunity to design a plan that addresses the root causes for the over-identification. And so beginning last spring, a team of individuals that really represent lots of different roles in our district, special education teachers, English language teachers, district administrators, we had some community partners join that conversation, got together and did a really thorough comprehensive data review. So they looked at academic data, they looked at behavioral data, they looked at attendance data, they looked at information that really describes those individual evaluations that were conducted that resulted in an identification of special education. And then that team made recommendations about what the potential root causes are for that over-identification. And from there, created various goals and action steps to support progress towards those goals. So right now, that report has been put together and it's been submitted to the Department of Public Instruction for review and approval. And there's a fourth step that's happening simultaneously, and that's called the procedural self-compliance assessment. And that's a process where we have a team of individuals who are reviewing a sample of our IEPs to really look at and ensure that our evaluations are done in a manner that is in compliance with all of the expectations from the Department of Public Instruction. So what I want to focus on is actually the goal and the action plan. So the team of individuals who did that comprehensive assessment review and determined some root causes and some potential goals identified three primary areas of focus. The first area was really focused on our English language arts. And that makes very good sense because, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the majority of the students who were identified in the area of reading. So they were identified as a student with a specific learning disability, and the area of identification was reading. And from there, we really talked a lot about the fact that we want to ensure that all of our kids, but particularly this subgroup of kids, have access to really rigorous, clearly articulated expectations in the area of English language arts. So with that goal, we're going to be focusing on getting that English language arts curriculum clearly articulated. We're going to be working with our staff to ensure that we have responsive practices in place for all learners. We want to ensure that there's differentiated instructional practices that are being applied for all of our learners. And there were a couple of things that I think are noteworthy, maybe not as large scale, but one of the things that we wanted to ensure is that all of our students had access to books written in their first language. And you know, you think about the importance of early reading and being able to engage in early reading with your kids when they're in preschool and early elementary age. And most kids can go to the library and they can check out a book that they can bring home, and their parent is able to read that to them throughout the course of the week. And we really want to make sure that all of our families, including our families who may have a parent who speaks and reads in a different first language like Spanish, can engage in that with their child. So we talked about the importance of building our classroom and building level libraries to include more books, more texts that are written in Spanish for our families who use that as their first language. And then likewise, we wanted to ensure that as we're investigating some new technology tools that support learning, we wanted to ensure and prioritize that those technology tools provided the opportunity for students who are learning English as a second language to receive that information in their first language if necessary. So that's our first goal. The second goal really focuses around improving family and community partnerships in order to support our families. And we've talked a lot over the past many weeks about the importance of families and their involvement in their students' education. And one of the things that we know is that for our families who speak a different language as their primary language, it is sometimes more complex to access information from around their child's school performance. So we really want to work on making sure that we're increasing accessibility by ensuring that we have translators and interpreters consistently available for our families. We want to make sure that our students who are learning English language have access to meaningful extended school day opportunities. And by that I mean, you know, after school activities that maybe provide some extra tutoring or academic support for students. And again, I think about, you know, as an English language speaker, when my child's materials come home to me in English, I'm able to look at that and read through it and support my learner in whatever they're struggling with. But if you happen to be a parent whose first language is Spanish and you read in Spanish, your ability to support your child might be impacted. So it's really important to us that we find some ways to build collaborations with community partnerships. Those already exist, but we really want to strengthen and expand that so that we're able to provide supports and services to students as needed. And then finally, our last goal really focuses specifically around the special education evaluation process. So we were found to over-identify students in the subgroup of students who are Hispanic in the area of SLD or specific learning disability. And we know that it's really important that all of our professionals who are engaged in those evaluations have the information they need to do that, to conduct those evaluations comprehensively and in a manner that eliminates culture as a factor. And I'm going to give you just a couple of examples to make that really meaningful. I'm a speech and language pathologist, and I frequently would evaluate students who were demonstrating language differences or disorders and might be a bilingual or an English language learner. And as a speech and language pathologist, it would be really important for me to understand the difference between a child whose language was developing differently because they're bilingual and learning two languages simultaneously versus a child who has a language disorder and the delay is the result of a disability. It'd be important for me to know that if a student is having a difficult time articulating speech sounds and that speech sound that is most challenging for them isn't a speech sound in their first language, I shouldn't call that a language or a speech disorder because that's not what it is. And that's also true when you think about specific learning disabilities. We want to make sure that when we're identifying a student with a specific learning disability in reading, that we're taking into consideration what their English language proficiency looks like, because they're trying to learn English as a second language and learning to read at the same time. So we really want to be able to be responsive and comprehensive in that approach. So next steps, the Department of Public Instruction will be reviewing and offering either feedback or approval of the disproportionality plan that we put forth. The next part would be really looking as a district and an administrative team at how we would align resources to support some of the goals that we've put forth. And then obviously we're going to monitor and respond to the data in relationship to those objectives and make changes as necessary and report those outcomes out to you. So do you have any questions about that report?
So Emily, what is the anticipated delivery from DPI on either feedback or approval?
I would expect that feedback very soon. The report was due last week, and I've already had one communication just asking for some clarification on that report. So the intent that they would be doing that soon. They give us kind of a timeline for implementing the plan, and that's really kind of a 24-month plan. So the feedback sooner is going to be necessary. I would anticipate within the next month.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Any other questions for Emily? Okay, thank you. Please keep us posted when that approval comes through, because yeah, I can imagine that time's a wasting.
Absolutely.
Move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
This brings us to the discussion portion of the agenda, and first up, Emily's going to stay right there, and we are going to go through the discussion regarding social emotional learning curriculum review for grades 7 and 8.
All right. I'm sorry that you have to put up with so much of me tonight. I am going to lead the conversation tonight, and this is a discussion item related to social emotional learning, specifically at the 7th and 8th grade level. And Jen, you feel free to jump in if there's things I miss along the way or we need to clarify. So I wanted to start out, I know that most of the individuals in this room have been very involved in this conversation over the course of the past couple of months, but I want to be respectful of the fact that there's people at home that are maybe tuning in for the first time, and there might be some people in the audience where this is their first opportunity to engage in the discussion. So a little bit of background for those individuals. We have been working together within our curriculum committee in response to community feedback to develop a social emotional curriculum that allows us to provide universal instruction to students, actually grades K4 through grade 8 currently. And at our last board meeting, you offered approval for our elementary age up through grade 6. And since that time, our teachers have started to implement that plan. And we had agreed at that time that we would come back together and continue to do some work around the 7th and 8th grade. And so we brought that back to curriculum committee last week, and I'm going to share some of the feedback around that. In relationship to social emotional learning, we currently in the West Bend School District use the WBSD way as a framework for establishing and teaching school behavioral expectations. And that tool has been extremely helpful to us. But one of the things that we believe strongly in is the emphasis on the development of the whole child. And we recognize that universal or whole group system-wide instruction is really a very important component of really teaching the whole child, and that universal instruction really allows us to have a more comprehensive strategy for teaching and modeling social emotional skills. And so as we move through this tonight, I just, that kind of becomes the basis for this conversation. And we've had a lot of conversation about student behavior and helping to support student behavior. And one of the things that we know is certainly there are lots of students who required more targeted instruction, more specific small group or individual instruction. But we know that universal strategies are one of the best ways of impacting the number of students who rise up and require those more specific interventions. So as a district, this has kind of been our journey thus far. We've been very appreciative of the community feedback. I know we have members in this community that have spent absolute many hours thinking about this, providing us specific feedback, and we've been doing our very best to be responsive to that. We met as a curriculum committee on October 5th, and then we came to the full board for discussion on October 11th. I apologize, I think I said November 5th the first time, but October 5th. And then from there, we took the information back to curriculum committee last week, Tuesday, and we kind of dug in deeper, and we made some strong recommendations from that discussion that we're bringing forward tonight to you for discussion. All right. So after much review and discussion, the committee together put forth a plan that does use Second Step as our primary resource with some modifications. And I'm going to bucket those into a couple of different categories. So during the course of these conversations, we've identified a couple of lessons that we are recommending for removal. We have also identified a couple of things that we felt really were missing in terms of what we wanted as a West Bend School District school community. So we identified a couple of supplementary lessons that we were going to create, and we did. And then potentially replacing a lesson with one of those supplementary options. We also talked about creating modified student handouts as a way to supplement and personalize learning in alignment with the West Bend School District Way, or the WBSD Way. And you know, one of the things I actually heard it brought up tonight, and this came up at curriculum committee, is we absolutely recognize that modifications that we make to this plan need to be in attention to the fact that we want to reduce human error. And we talked at that meeting about the idea of going through individual lessons and identifying, okay, maybe there was a video that we didn't prefer and we could skip it. The problem with that is then we absolutely are depending upon lots of educators who want to do what's absolutely best for kids, and they want to follow our lead and direction. And we don't want to put them in a position where human error is likely. So we really focused on the fact that either we are going to remove the lesson, we're going to replace the lesson, or we're going to supplement the lesson with a student handout revision. So that became our focus. And the other thing we spoke a great deal about was the idea of how can we extend learning into the home. Absolutely, the family and family connection to this process is something we value, and we know our families value it. So we really spent some time talking about how can we ensure that we're providing families with prompts and questions and communication targets that allow them to personalize the discussion based upon their own family values. So I am going to open up a document that I know you had the opportunity to look at in board docs. And oh boy, it's very big on the screen. Let me see if I can. I'm pretty tech savvy, but when I'm standing at this podium, I can't problem solve at all. Okay, here we go. So these are the recommendations that we came forward with from the curriculum committee. And I'm just going to kind of move through this quickly without reading each of the different sections, but I kind of want to target what we did in terms of those larger buckets of recommendations. So 2 recommendations came forward in terms of lessons that we wanted to create, and we created those. One of them focused on digital citizenship, and that's really the idea of teaching our kids about safe technology use, and also honoring the fact that how we use technology at school might be different than how kids are using technology at home. And how do kids reconcile the difference between a school-based project and how families are allowing them to engage in technology use in their home environment. So we created a presentation and then also a student handout to support that. And we intended to insert that at the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade level. We also made the recommendation to replace a lesson. So the first lesson at actually 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is called Starting Middle School, and it really focuses on kind of an overview of the challenges that students might face in middle school. And then the intent is, how can Second Step or social emotional learning support you in those challenges? And you know, in listening to feedback and talking as a team, it was really important to us that we shifted and looked at who can support you both at school and at home. So these are some of the challenges you might face as a learner in a new middle school setting, and who would you go to for support? That might be your mom and dad, might be a teacher, a counselor, a friend, an aunt, whoever it is that you define as your family or your people. And so we recommended the replacement of that lesson with our West Bend School District developed lesson. We looked at removing one lesson from 7th grade and then actually a group of 5 lessons from 8th grade, and I'll explain kind of the 2 themes in which we made that decision. One of the lessons in 7th grade, which is the preventing harassment, and then there's 3 bullying lessons in the 8th grade level that we made the recommendation to remove, because instead of focusing on individual student skill development, it was really focusing on a community response. And we really wanted to be in attention to that being one of the concerns that was brought forth by community members. So those 4 lessons were recommended for removal. And then as you kind of look down, there's a couple of lessons that we recommended a modified student handout to support learning, either to extend, for example, there's a lesson that has kind of a narrow snapshot of statistics around bullying, and we really wanted to provide students with a larger, more comprehensive view. So we embedded that into the student handout. So as you move into 8th grade, 2 other lessons were recommended for removal, and those were 2 lessons that really focused on the student's future self. And we just identified as a committee that content doesn't necessarily have a significant impact on today's learning. It's really kind of that forward thinking, and it may not be necessary in this particular scope and sequence. Okay, so as I scroll down, the other thing I wanted to just note at the bottom of the document is that there's a whole set of lessons that were identified, or the question related to them really had to do with connectedness to families and or alignment with technology use at home and at school. And we just wanted to list those and identify that that became the basis of creating those 2 WBSD lessons, is we wanted to be in attention to that. And the direction to teachers is really that they continue to weave those 2 concepts through as they're addressing those lessons one by one. All right. So moving forward, I just wanted to remind everybody that, you know, the instructional format for the social emotional learning is whole group instruction, has a mini lesson type format. At the Badger level, the intent is that teachers will be the primary instructors, and they're doing that in collaboration with their school counselors. And I can tell you that their original plan was actually to have their administrative team support that as well. So they would be looking at partnering around that. There are individual partner and small group learning activities embedded within the lessons. And I did want to highlight that there is a responsive framework in place to support students who communicate or exhibit strong emotions. Our school counseling team has been working on being prepared for the fact that if you're talking about bullying and that triggers a strong emotion in a student, they may want to have some follow-up conversation in relationship to that. And there's a structure in place to support that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was the family communication prompts. And I'll actually talk about that right here on this slide. So throughout this process, we've really talked a lot about the importance of communication and the importance of transparency. And we have kind of a 4-level communication structure that is being recommended in conjunction with the social emotional learning curriculum. Communication is going to go out to families preceding each unit, so families can know in advance what the unit topic is and key learning targets. And then in addition to that, families will receive communication per lesson. And with that lesson communication will be a conversational prompt. So on lesson 5, you'll have your topic, your key components for learning, and then conversational prompts for parents to extend the learning at home. And that's what I referenced a few minutes ago. And again, really giving them the opportunity to talk about, maybe there's a calming strategy that we didn't talk about at school, but it's something that you use in your home, and you want to ensure that your child has that opportunity to learn that, or something that you've experienced as an adult, and to share that with your child. And then the last part of that communication plan really focuses on instructor support. So we've embedded in there not just communication to parents or for parents, but we've also included in there communication to our teachers, so that our teachers know exactly what the modifications are, exactly what the communication prompts are, and it's just a really clear and consistent support, so that they're aware of what they need to be teaching. All right, so this is your opportunity for discussion and questions, and I will do my best to field anything that you have for me.
Questions for Emily?
I have a couple, as usual. So one of the questions I have, thus far, how many families, I don't need to know where they are or any of that, have opted out of these lessons in district-wide?
So the opt-out process is that a family would communicate to the building principal, and then we do have a structure in place for principals to insert that information, so we're able to view it daily as a system. And now we haven't, I mean, in all fairness, we haven't rolled anything out at the 7th and 8th grade level, so we haven't been receiving input from parents of 7th and 8th graders since the beginning of the school year. But the last time I looked at that dashboard, we were under 10 students who've been opted out as a system. And again, that's only going to include the families who've called, or either written an email, called a teacher, written a teacher, and that was pushed forward to the principal, or communicated directly with the principal. That wouldn't include a family who made the decision to pull their child out of the system, and that wasn't an accompanying type of communication.
Well, it's funny you would bring that up, because that's actually my second question. So since the start of school, how many families have opted or pulled their child from our district?
So I can't speak to how many families have pulled their student out of our district, but I can say confidently that we've had less than 10 families specifically request to opt out of the lessons. Do you have any feedback on the other, Jen, or is that something we can investigate?
Currently, there's 8 who have opted out of lessons, and then when we look at enrollment, we can run those numbers and we can speak to that specifically. There'd be a variety of reasons. Maybe they're moving, all of those, so there's generally an exit process, and we can get that from our registrar.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see that. And then a topic that's been brought up multiple times, and we talked about it at the last board meeting, and then I know some parents, or maybe a student referenced it this evening, and I am, my 20-year-old daughter at one time told me I am the meanest mom in West Bend, so I do get to ask this question. She was in 2nd grade at the time, but I think she would still agree I am. So I would like to talk a little bit about consequences. So we're talking a lot about social and emotional learning, and think what you want, but I'm a big fan of consequences, and I'm also a big fan of punishment when things have gone awry. And I'm also a big fan of actually divorcing people who can't follow rules. So whether that means, we're going to remove you from our district, or we're not going to work with you any longer, or whatever that is. So I guess I'd like to speak to that a little bit. I've specifically asked to have the high school principals here to speak to us at a future meeting, but I would think that there is some level of consequences. So we've taught you now these lessons on how to appropriately act. We understand there are some kids who have other circumstances, not arguing about that. But, I think there does need to be some conversation community-wide about people who consistently break rules and can't seem to follow rules and can't seem to behave and, kind of understand, no different than you have to raise your hand before you can speak in class and all these things. But if you continue to break rules and you're disrespectful and you're, disrupting a class, what are those rules and what does that look like for us? And what are our steps then to say, we've really put up with quite enough and we're done? So I guess I'd like to see that added somehow. Maybe that's not appropriate for this particular conversation, but I do think it's a credible comment to be made, and I'd like to, acknowledge the people that mentioned it. And it's been mentioned now at several board meetings that we have a serious problem with it. So I'd like to kind of get to the root of that. I'm not suggesting that SEL is the problem with why people don't behave. I'm suggesting it's probably been a lack of consequences over the years or a lack of follow through. As a parent, that's a critical piece. And again, as the meanest mom in West Bend, I know that. So I think that that's really important. I'd like to hear more about that at future board meetings.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nancy. And I think, you bring up some really good questions. And I definitely think, response to behavior is one piece to shaping behavior, right? I mean, and we all know that as parents. But the other part that's really important is that proactive piece, and really teaching and ensuring that kids absolutely know the expectations, and we frame that with our WBSD way, right? We try to really frame what are the expectations in our learning environment. But sometimes those expectations really have to be broken down and taught and modeled and shaped. And we want to give kids as many opportunities to learn a skill as we possibly can, and as many opportunities to learn the skill in different ways, because sometimes kids learn in different ways, and we have to present it differently. And then always looking at, now when you've been given these opportunities and we know you know the skill and you're not demonstrating it, what is our response? And certainly we have policies and things in place that help guide those decisions. But I know we're in attention to that. I know we've already reached out and are looking at bringing forth more discussion about that at future board meetings.
On your previous slide, you talk about the instructional format, whole group, small group. Remind me and remind the community, how long are these lessons? How often are these lessons?
So these lessons are about 25 to 30 minutes, and our intention is that it would be a weekly lesson at the 7th and 8th grade level.
And then if a parent chooses to opt their student out, where does that student go? What activity does that student participate in when they're opted out?
So right now, I know at Badger Middle School, right now the group, it's hard to predict how many families will opt out, but the intention is that those students will have an alternate location, probably the library. It might be a time to engage in self-selected reading, homework. We'll definitely have somebody there being a part of that environment with them. We wouldn't have them in a location where they were unsupervised and not engaged.
Can parents choose to opt their students out of a history lesson, a science lesson, any other lesson that they'd want to opt their student out of?
So I'm going to ask Jen to jump in on that.
Yes, we would want to work with a family if there's something that they have of a concern. Again, it could be a historical lesson that, grandpa maybe, fought in the war, was injured, those kinds of things. We don't know what, triggers there might be for kids or those pieces. So we would just want any family to feel with anything their child's learning that they can reach out to the teacher to learn more, ask questions, and make a plan for their child. So I would encourage conversation.
And I'm just thinking as you're speaking, I know sometimes we'll have families who will look more closely at like the health curriculum, and that sometimes will bring up some questions that families will want us to work around.
With all of the COVID concerns and so forth, if there's a parent who's concerned who would like to come in and observe a class, of 30 to 45-minute delivery, is that possible in this era, or do we not allow anybody more into the building than we absolutely need?
Right now we're at kind of an absolute need, but we've had several teachers who said, I would love to maybe take a video of a class or something, with just them teaching, because we also have to be cognizant of that there's children in the room and we might have consent. We can't, just involve everyone. So right now with COVID where it's at, we're a little more restrictive, but again, we would want to be transparent and just make that option available. Like I said, right now it's probably a video option.
There was a lot of discussion around modifying this program, this curriculum, adding lessons, deleting lessons, supplementing lessons with other things. I can't imagine how many different resources and curriculums we have across our system. Is modifying a lesson or a curriculum normal? Do we do that in history classes and in science classes where we might supplement something or simply not teach a lesson because of a certain, rhyme or reason?
I would liken it more to think about a whole textbook, right? We can't possibly maybe cover everything. So we have units of study, we have curriculum that's been approved, and we also have teachers being responsive to their kids. Their pacing might be adjusted. So when you talk about different modifications, yes, taking all of a sudden something that was approved, expected, and just someone taking their own license to change it and make those kind of modifications? No. But do we have that authority? Yes. I think one of the conversations that Emily spoke to was, the number of teachers and having something accessible and making it really clear so that they weren't down to the wire of like, oh, I got to remember to skip slide 13 in this one, that kind of thing. That was our attention to more of the whole group. And I know Tanya and Aaron were in those conversations as well, so feel free to jump in. But we were just really mindful of kind of the resource and navigating that and taking out human error, as Emily spoke to.
That you actually bring up a really good point. That was one of the things that I had intended to wrap back around to. But, absolutely we want to create a social emotional learning curriculum or put forth something that really meets the needs of our school community. And we have had some great resources thrown to us from folks in the community. And I actually did have an opportunity. I spent some time over the weekend looking at the resource from Children's Hospital, and there's some great lessons in there. And one of the things I think is important moving forward is, our recommendation and hope is that we can come back at the end of the month and take action on this plan. But that doesn't mean that it's a forever plan. And we talked about the idea of, maybe we can spend some time doing some greater investigation into some of those specific units. We pulled out in this proposal 3 bullying lessons at the 8th grade level. Maybe we look at some of those other resources, like the resource from Children's Hospital. There's a bullying prevention unit in there. Maybe we pull some units from there and we replace the ones that we've taken out. I do think there's other really good resources out there, and I think some of our hope in being able to get this rolling at our 7th and 8th grade level is really, we do feel some urgency around getting that universal instruction in place for kids and ensuring that we're teaching and we're modeling and we're reinforcing some of those skills. But I think our curriculum committee and I think our administrative team and the people who support this instruction are absolutely open to having continued conversation about how can we continue to make it exactly what we need it to be for our West Bend school community.
I just, Joel, your question was one of my questions on, just put it in context. You're talking, did I hear it right, 25 to 30 minutes a week? Mm-hmm. And you got about 36 weeks of teaching. I'm just doing math on 180 days. So you're talking about 18 hours of curriculum for the whole year in a student's life.
26 lessons, actually.
Yep.
26 lessons.
Give or take a few at the different levels.
I'm just doing quick math here. That's about 3-4% of their education that we're giving them a year. Just doing rough math.
Yeah.
So
you're
I know
way better at math than I am at the podium, so I'm gonna agree with whatever your calculation was.
I just think for a community, you got to put this in context for what we're talking about 3 to 5% of the curriculum that a 7th and 8th grader receives. And I know we talked about middle school last, and it's currently not in the high school. So I know we're spending a lot of time and effort into this. I had some concerns. Maybe my follow-up question to that is you mentioned about 40 lessons. We're talking about removing 8, 9, 10 lessons and then altering another maybe half a dozen to 10 lessons. So we're talking about adjusting about 25–30% of that curriculum, that 18 hours over a given year, and either changing it or replacing it with something.
So we are looking at removing 6 lessons, replacing one of the 6, and adding one additional WBSD created lesson. So, and then some of the modifications, and I did not count up the modifications, but we created about 4 modified student handouts as I kind of just eyeball this list.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
again, just I'm putting it in context. I know we spent a lot of time. I know it's a community hot button.
Yeah.
I know it's important what we're teaching our kids, and we need to spend due diligence and time on it. I want to thank my committee members for all the time they've spent on it, and I look forward to just further discussion on this.
I appreciate the time as well. I watch all the committee meetings and appreciate the time our administration puts into it. My point is simply that no resource is perfect. And that's why I throw that question to the superintendent. How many resources do we have in our district? I'm sure we have hundreds. And how often are they modified? All the time, because there's not a resource out there that's perfect. And so, you know, Second Step has been around for a long time. It's been used in school districts all over the country for a long time. It's not perfect, and our curriculum committee and our administration has taken a lot of time, a lot of community feedback to make revisions on it. And then you still have the option to opt out, which is a 20–25 minute lesson maybe once a week. So I appreciate all the time everyone's put into it and addressing the community feedback and the time put into putting in supplemental resources where appropriate. And then of course keeping the door open to put in other resources. Like you said, this is not, you know, something that's in place forever as it is. It's just like every resource we have or a curriculum or program can be modified and changed, and not saying that modified or changed based on an individual teacher, you know, thinking that I do want to teach this even though they tell me not to. I'm not saying that, but you know, there's always room for improvement on everything that we do. And so appreciate the time and effort everyone's put into this.
And I just want to reiterate what you just said, Joel, in terms of modifications and changes not at the classroom level, but at this level. So in the event that we decided we were going to continue to grow and evolve this curriculum, we would just continue with the process that we've already started. So if we were going to look at the addition of a couple of bullying lessons to replace the few that we're recommending for removal, that would come back through curriculum committee. We'd investigate that, we'd talk about it, we'd ask for some community feedback, and then we would bring that back to the board. So I think that's a really important point to clarify.
Yep.
And with Joel's comment, that, I mean, that's basically what we do with all curriculum, is things are evolving and changing always, and we're reevaluating them and coming to the table with what's best for our community at the time.
Absolutely.
Emily, could you also speak, going back to my consequence thing, I'm not getting off that tonight. So, okay, so we've got a lesson, you find this supplemental lesson about bullying, okay? And so at the end of the lesson, you know, just everyone bear with me. You know, Johnny, we're not gonna bully anybody in our class anymore is some video that we watch, right? I would love to see at the end of that video then kind of to bring it back around and say, remember, the West Bend way is A, B, and C. And, you know, if I'm in 7th grade, if I get to C, guess where I'm going? I'm going to Mr. Ullman's office or whoever office that you would go to at, I don't know, I don't have a kid at the middle school anymore, but whatever. So, you know, and if that doesn't, you know, then we're making a call to your parents or who's ever at home with you, that type of thing. And then, you know, if we have to go further, this would be the next step. I would really like to see that implemented, so that I think there's something to be said for, I watched a great video and you know, that kind of sparked some interest. But now you really brought it home to me to say, like, this is what happens here in West Bend to me if I can't follow the proper policies and rules. And I think for me, that might be something that maybe is missing a little bit. You know, and I'd really like to see that. When there are consequences to actions, we want you to be able to bring your concerns forward and all these great things, but there are always consequences to bad behavior and bad actions. And I'm just not so sure that some of our students understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually really appreciate your alignment to the WBSD way, because you're absolutely right. The teachings have to connect back to our expectations, our expectations and how they look in the classroom, how they look in the cafeteria, how they look in the hallway, how they look on the bus. I mean, that is the expectation. And certainly we want to do all that teaching, but there's still an expectation that students follow the rules of our school. And that is the point at which we really look at consequences to those behaviors. And then consequences that also include opportunities to learn and do better, right? Because we always want to give our kids as often as we can the opportunity to do better, because that's what learning is.
So Emily, following along with Joel's comments about modification and this process, I appreciate administration's willingness to listen and to flex and adjust based on feedback and what we see. And you know, Chris, I'm going to knock myself out here. I'm right there with you on First Amendment rights, the ability to come forward and speak freely. That's who we are as a society. But just as we're making adjustments here, we've seen some adjustment coming from Second Step. Can you share, are you hearing anything more? Because for them to dig in their heels and not change is a going out of business plan for them. They're getting hammered across the country, as are their peers in this particular space. So as we're looking at potential revisions beyond what we might do just this year, I have to imagine they're doing the same thing, and the curriculum we might see coming out for the fall of 2022 would look different than what we have right now for, say, 7th and 8th grade. Are you getting any foreshadowing from them as to where they might be heading?
We actually brought those conversations forward. It was Tim, Emily, and myself, you know, with our, not just our representative, but taking it and scaling it through their organization, because, like we said, the next iteration of your business model should be building a responsive portal so that we can tailor things to unique needs. So while they weren't there yet, they were starting to talk about that in their organization, and we raised our hand and said, we will go first. At doing that, you know, keep us in mind, keep us connected to those conversations, because we're ready, willing, and able to do that. And you also touch on a key point, like what if they do make shifts in it? We would not be bringing those shifts into a classroom until they go back to curriculum committee and get vetted. I think that was one of those concerns with an electronic resource being nimble like that. What happens when it shifts? So our commitment in bringing something, again, social emotional learning, usually we saw curricular process just around academics, you know, that services, the counselors will speak, those kinds of things were responsive services in a system. We're choosing to treat this differently. We're choosing to honor it as its own curriculum. It's lessons that are in front of our kids, running it through that robust process so that we can garner that feedback and that you're assured that that comes back to you for approval should changes occur. So, you know, I'm hopeful around that. Like I said, we've said you need to take this all the way up the chain, because you know, this is your next iteration of your product in some way. So we're hopeful. And they also were exploring too, another thing was, you know, guest licenses so that we could check them out to families so they could view it in their home and make things feel accessible, because that was another piece that they heard. So those are absolutely conversations they're having within their organization.
And there is a notification process if they make a change to the curriculum, and actually anybody can go on to the website and you can see any modifications or changes. They were responsive when we reached out with concerns about a particular website that was referenced in a couple of lessons, and that's been completely eliminated. It's no longer on any of the slideshows. It's no longer on any of the student handouts. And I actually reached back out this week because one of the conversations in curriculum committee was focused on a particular word choice in one of the lessons. We thought that maybe they could have picked a different word, certainly a word that some of our 7th and 8th graders hear and use, but as educators, we felt like there might be a better option. And I sent out a message, and our our service person actually was pulling that back to his leadership team for consideration. So they've definitely been responsive in that manner. But I agree, you know, we're hopeful that they're going to look at some options in terms of flexibility within the portal.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also reminded of the concern about encouraging students to have social media when actually we responded by agreeing with that and using the opportunity to explain what our technical responsibilities are online and how no, you do not have to be on social media. You can talk to your parents about that. And in the lesson in particular, they were wanted to use social media to market a project of theirs, but they can. That doesn't mean they have to have their own. They can ask their parents or their parents' friends to do that for them. So I see it as an opportunity to talk about digital responsibility, and it doesn't have to be a negative thing.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments for Emily on this topic? Otherwise, we have an action item coming up at our next meeting on the 22nd. So, okay. We'll close this out. Thank you, Emily, for a full report. And you can stay right there, and we move into the elementary school counseling curriculum. We should get you a chair.
All right, I know. I was just thinking about stretching. Okay, so thank you one more time for letting me facilitate a conversation. And I'm actually, Alyssa, if you want to pop up. So Alyssa Beertzer is the elementary school counselor from Fair Park, and Angie Borst is also here from Jackson Elementary to help field any questions. And I was happy that she was able to join us because obviously these two professionals are the experts in this next conversation. But I'll lead the conversation, and then if you have specific questions, we will field those together. So actually, Superintendent Wimmer just did an outstanding job of creating a segue into this conversation as she was sharing kind of that idea of how in the past we really looked at services like elementary counseling through a different lens than we looked at our curriculum adoption. And you know, this process of refining the proposal around social emotional learning has really kind of highlighted for us the importance of being very transparent in terms of what we are putting in front of our kids. And so we really made the decision when we were asked to hold on our social emotional learning instruction earlier in the year. We applied that to our elementary school counseling instruction and made the decision that we really needed to pull together that curriculum in a way that was very clear so that our community members and our teachers and our parents really had an absolute clear idea of what was included in there. So we are following the exact same process that we're following with our other curriculum areas. We brought this to the committee earlier in the month for discussion, and then we're bringing it forward tonight to you for discussion. So just an overview, I wanted to share with you our elementary school counseling model. It's a comprehensive counseling model that includes both direct and indirect services, and those services align with 3 different areas of student development. Academic learning, so those school readiness behaviors, personal and social skills, and then actually already as early as kindergarten, we start thinking about getting kids ready to be successful in the career, in a career. Tonight, though, we're going to talk specifically about the direct counseling services, grade K through 4th grade, and we're talking about the whole group universal instruction that happens. And we've always referred to that as counselor connection, and counselor connection lessons have been happening in the district for gosh, I have adult stepchildren in their 30s, and I know that they received counseling connection when they were at Green Tree. So many years. But I think one of the things that we've done over the course of the past many years, and it's really been led by this group of professionals who are our school counseling team, they've really refined and created a curriculum that drives this time spent in classrooms within instruction. So in addition to the whole group instruction, our school counselors do provide small group targeted instruction, and that's for kids or classrooms that require a little bit more than what's provided in the general curriculum. And Alyssa's given me some really good examples of that. So for example, if in a second grade class they're working on school-ready behaviors like being a good listener, and a particular classroom is struggling to learn and demonstrate that skill, they might do some targeted instruction, some extra instruction to work on that skill with the whole class or with a small subset of kids within that classroom. And then, of course, individualized instruction and support and services. And those are the much more intensive services that are really designed for one or more students who have a very specific need. So the West Bend School District Elementary Counseling Curriculum actually is a series of lessons that were developed by our West Bend School District Elementary School Counseling team. So you're going to notice in this plan that there isn't a single primary resource. When we're talking about our social emotional learning that is taught by our classroom teachers, we've identified that second step as a primary resource. There isn't a single primary resource connected to this curriculum. It's really comprised of various resources, all of which are laid out in the plan. The learning objectives align with the American School Counselor Association's mindset and behaviors. So those are kind of like the standards for for our school counselors here in the States and specifically in Wisconsin. And this team put together 8 units and a minimum of 10 lessons that really target those standards. So I wanted to just highlight what those are for you. The ASCA, the American School Counselor Association Behaviors and Mindset, are made up of things like learning strategies, self-management skills, social skills, and then you'll see under the mindsets, focus on self-confidence, a sense of belonging, development of the whole child, understanding lifelong learning is necessary for career success, a positive attitude. So those are the standards that the lesson is aligned to, or that the curriculum is aligned to, I apologize. So as a team, we have put together 8 units of study, and the school counseling team identified within each of these units of study a K4 progression. So there's a developmental progression of skills within each of these units of studies. Lessons are grade specific, but you can actually view within the curriculum topics of study or specific lessons aligned by grade level. And these are the units of studies that are connected to the standards. And you're going to see we used a similar color coding strategy, and we did that because we wanted to be transparent about the fact that although this is a different curriculum and it's aligned with the American School Counselor Association mindset and behaviors, there is some overlap in the fact that some of the skills are the same skills that we're addressing through social emotional learning. So the lesson structure, I'm going to actually show you the curriculum guideline, but I did want to just identify again for you that it really focuses, so when we go into this curriculum, you're going to see that it identifies the objective, what mindset or behavior it aligns to, and sometimes it's more than one. It's going to identify the key vocabulary and concepts that are taught within each lesson. And then it's going to identify any primary resource. And by primary resource, we mean that is the resource that will be used every time the lesson is taught. It doesn't mean that it's a curriculum resource like Second Step. It just simply means every time they teach this lesson, this is the resource that will be used. and then a series of supplementary resources, and most of those are children's books. And the reason we have a list of supplementary resources is because this program or this curriculum is really built upon the idea of being responsive to student needs. And what that allows our counselors to do is if they're teaching a given lesson in second grade, as I mentioned, and maybe that group of kiddos really needs one more lesson to understand that particular skill, they have a set of resources that they can draw upon to come back into the classroom and do a secondary lesson, either with the entire classroom or with smaller groups of kids. And then like our like the social emotional learning curriculum that I spoke about earlier, we really continue to value the family communication and engagement. And so the counseling curriculum also includes elements that drive that communication and connection with families. And so the lesson structure is linked, and that was available in board docs, and it's also available on the West Bend School District website. It is very similar in layout to what you've seen us create in regards to social emotional learning. It divides the units up, and I'm going to scroll down, by unit, by grade level, and you're able to go in and you're able to click on those and identify the lesson objective, the domain or standard that it's aligned to, concepts and vocabulary, primary resources, and then supplementary resources. And one of the recommendations that came out of our curriculum committee was also to make that list of children's books available to families. And so that's also included in this document, and it's also posted on the West Bend School District website. And so that's the information that we wanted to share with you. Do you have questions for us, discussion as a group? And I'll let you.
All kidding aside, I think the next time you should bring the book entitled My Mouth is a Volcano so you could read that also.
I would feel much more comfortable with reading that story. Yes. It's a good book.
We needed a little joke. Everybody calm down.
Thank you.
So again, this is a discussion item tonight, and at the next board meeting, we would be taking action on this. Is that correct?
Correct.
I just got a question on careers and then a follow-up comment. So could you explain more about how you address that career step, especially in the younger grade school area?
It really is trying to get them to connect to their why they're at school. I'm being ready to learn, which ties to the West Bend way, but as a learner, what am I preparing for? What are things that interest me? We spend a lot of time throughout the ages talking about what are things that you value, kind of a good fit. They talk about good fit books, and so we also talk about good fit career choices, and so matching those interests and exploring. It really is more an exploration of what options are and trying to expose them to more things beyond what they may know somebody in that particular career, and knowing that probably even in the elementary, by the time they get to high school, their career, I've said many times in these lessons, your career may not have been invented yet. Yeah. You may invent it, but you need to know how to learn, how to ask questions. What will my qualifications be for this career? Do I want to work inside or outside? Do I want to be kind of self-employed? Am I more comfortable being an independent worker and learner, or would I prefer to be leading a team or part of a larger group? So that is some of the conversations as we go up through the grade levels, but very much tied to like, what are your interests and how can we match that to something that you could be a contributing member of our community.
And I think, you bring up a good point. No, we're not training 6-year-olds for their future careers or skills or anything like that.
No resume writing yet.
But so much of it is, kids are familiar with their families first, right? And then they're starting to get to see new school careers, like, oh, there's teacher, and maybe I went to a doctor, and there's nurse. They're exploring that. So that you talk about, who's in our community as we bring, the fire department comes in and does visits and those kinds of things. It's just expanding kids, like, who are people in our community? What do they do? What are different options?
Wanting them to question and explore far beyond our time teaching them in the classroom. And you made me think of the career clusters, and we do start to use that terminology that will follow them up through the high school as early as 3rd and 4th grade. The younger grades, we're talking about like groups of things, but that career clusters term, they're ready and excited, and it kind of gives them a rejuvenated, oh yeah, this is why we're doing what we're doing, and to tie it to their curricular pieces that their classroom teachers are building upon all year long.
Yeah, thank you. And some people know, some people don't know. My dad was retired after the military. He was a counselor in a public school district for 30 years. So I have appreciation for counselors. I think they're much more, I see the students, my father affected, and helping them with career choices. And to Nancy's comment, helping them with discipline. The counselor sometimes sees the discipline problems and behavior, and you direct them to maybe what they want to learn, and then their discipline stops happening. I'm getting excited talking about counselors. But anyway, thank you for the counselors in this district and for what they do. They're sometimes unsung heroes to a student and the development of them.
I appreciate that.
So I think Kurt is suggesting that you all go to boot camp and you come back as military people to help the students understand things better. Is that what you were saying, Kurt? Then you can implement the discipline in there at the end, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, we all could use a little more discipline.
For sure we could.
I think an important piece too is this is the piece that they're delivering to the whole class, right? Their work far extends beyond that. These are a handful of lessons that they're delivering in a whole class, and they certainly can help our teachers and our staff be responsive to others, but they are doing a lot of small group, individual work, and really serving in that need. So whether it's a behavior, an academic struggle, those things, they're helping our students at that kind of that whole school, that small group as well as that targeted could be individual. And even if students aren't seeing our counselors, I know that our families feel a connection to those counselors because, when we're navigating something and, this simply could be the return to school, a lot of calls prior to school year starting to our counselors, like, how do I have this conversation? How do I do that? Really just talking that through and processing that. So they're a resource. And something to celebrate is we have full-time counselors in all of our schools. They have that as a primary placement. That's not a commitment that other districts have made. They split schools, they travel, they have larger caseloads. So it just speaks to, the work that they can do in our schools.
Absolutely.
Any other questions I can help with?
Tie his hands down. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Good stuff.
Thank you. And then this will also be, and thank you, Alyssa and Angie, for coming. This will also be on the agenda for the next board meeting as an action item. So thank you so much for all of your time tonight. I'll let somebody else come up to the podium.
I think we've got one more from you, don't we? The hits just keep on coming.
Let me see what I have in my binder.
Discussion item C, overview of changes in the state issued report card, presented to us by Emily, no, sorry, that's Tina Van Roo.
He's really, no,
sorry.
This one is Tina, she's far smarter.
So Tina Van Roo, District Assessment Coordinator, thank you.
Right. Hello. So I'm presenting tonight to talk about the state accountability report cards that are going to be released shortly. I wanted to take the opportunity to reground ourselves because it has been a while since these have been issued. Oh, geez. Okay. So the state of Wisconsin gives report cards to every publicly funded school and district. They collect data for 3 years or more, and they put it into 4 different priority areas: achievement, growth, target groups, and on track to graduation. All of those data then go through a calculation, and districts and schools are issued a rating, an overall score that is aligned to a 5-star rating. The last time we saw accountability report cards was from the 18-19 school year, so hopefully this image of the state with the aligned score and color rings a bell. Then in 2019-20, no report cards were issued, and that was something that all states adhered to nationally because the U.S. Department of Ed gave a blanket waiver because of the spring closure due to the pandemic. For that reason, many of the state assessments were not offered, and all of that required data wasn't available for report cards to be issued. But last year, in 2021, we successfully, in the state of Wisconsin, were able to do the state assessments and get back on our data collection processes, so the report cards are going to be issued. We have internally already received the preliminary results, and the public results are set to be released next Tuesday, the 16th. During that gap in time when the report cards weren't issued, the state had worked hard getting feedback from the different schools and districts and took an opportunity to revise many of the factors on it. So each of these items listed will kind of go through slide by slide so you can see what the changes are that are to be expected next Tuesday. The first change is visual. So as you can see on the left, the old report card had that color coding aligned to the 5-star rating, and then there was lots of tables and numbers that had all of the assessment results, attendance results, etc. on it. The new format, as you see on the right, reduced the amount of tables and put together a more graphic visual. It reduced the text, and it helps people to better understand than just looking at numbers alone. Another new piece to the report card are 2 statements. On top of each report card, districts were given the option to create and construct a statement that could be placed. So West Bend did elect to do this, so there will be 1 statement that will similarly be on the district and all of the schools' report cards. The second statement, which is listed at the bottom visual, is something that the Department of Public Instruction crafted and placed on every single report card. And really it is a statement of caution, just saying not to look at this and interpret the results with caution because of the pandemic that arose in between these 2 creations of the report cards. The 5-star rating scale is aligned to different cut scores. The old cut scores, which came with that color coding, have been revisited. So the significantly exceeds expectations, which align to a 5-star rating, that range of cut scores has remained the same. The 3 ranges in the middle, exceeds expectations, meets expectations, and meets few, the range has all been increased. And then the fails to meet expectations aligned to the 1-star, that range of cut scores has been decreased. The old cut scores have been in place since report cards were first issued in the 2015-16 school year, and with the pandemic and the change of the report card, DPI felt that it was time to revise and put out the new cut scores. One of the bigger changes on the report cards is in aligned to a new priority area. So as I mentioned in the first slide, there are 4. We have an area for student achievement, growth, the new one, which I'll go through now, the target group outcomes, and also the on track to graduation. The previous one that you might be familiar with was closing the gaps. DPI decided to get rid of this because that area was very volatile. You could have one student move into a gap group, like students with disabilities or students of English language learners. So one student moving into that group or out of that group could either create a score for the calculations or eliminate a score for the calculations. So in an effort to really target who was at the greatest need, they created a new group that's called the target group outcomes. The target group outcomes basically take the 25th percentile at the bottom of your scores, attendance or graduation rate, and put all of the same calculations that are applied to this report card and apply it to that bottom quartile, that bottom group. They often say that you can take the target group outcomes and think of it as a mini report card within this big report card. After I presented to the curriculum committee, there were some follow-up questions, so I thought I'd spend a little more time describing how these target group outcomes are calculated. When they're trying to create a target group in the area of achievement and growth, they look for how we did on our state assessments for 3 years of data or more, and they can create a target group based off of the kids who participated in the areas of ELA and math. Then when we switch over to looking at absenteeism or graduation, different target groups could be created for that as well. So there is potential that one student could be identified in all of the different target groups, or it could be potential that one student only applies to one of those areas. For the different 4 priority areas, how those calculations are determined are based off of each school and each district's percentage of students that are economically disadvantaged. So the 4 priority areas start out with an even weight, where all 4 of them are 25% each. Then they'll look at the rate of economically disadvantaged, and they'll apply, a scale to achievement and growth. So if we have a higher percentage of students that are economically disadvantaged, a greater weight will be applied to growth and a lesser weight will be applied to achievement. Then vice versa, if we have a lower rate of economically disadvantaged, achievement will be weighted higher and growth will be weighted less. Then the remaining 2 categories will evenly be divided to fill up that 100% of the calculation. This year, because of the pandemic and the skip year that we had where no assessments were given, our K-4 schools are only going to have 3 priority weight areas. They are not going to have the target group, the new area, on their report cards because they have to have 2 consecutive years of info in one building to be able to get that. So our calculations for elementary are going to be very different than for the rest of the district, which just amplifies how every calculation on these report cards are unique to the school and district. One thing that I think is pretty cool about the addition that's new here is the information collected about course and program data. This information is going to be at the end of the report card, and it's really for information only. A lot of the info that is used in calculation is all about achievement rates, growth rates, graduation, and attendance, a lot of that quantitative data. But there's also much more to schools than just that. There's a lot of qualitative info, which includes course and program opportunities. So DPI took all that feedback and they started collecting this information in 2 different areas. One being post-secondary preparation, which would include different course types such as advanced courses and dual enrollment. And then the other area which would include our arts education. When the report cards are released, we know that the data that is going to show on those pages is going to be inaccurate. The data lags a year, and we have already identified corrections we need to make in our Skyward system to improve that process. And DPI has to work to create their collection process, specifically in the area, which is the 3rd bullet under the post-secondary prep, the industry recognized credentials. So when I present this information at the next board meeting with their actual results, we know those numbers are going to be wrong. It does not affect the score, and I will present information about what we really offer in these different course and program opportunities. So all this information, like I said, we get ahead of time. We get our assessment data trickled in throughout the summer. We get our preliminary report cards about a month before everything gets publicly released. All that information goes to our members of cabinet, and they take that information to really look at what strategic actions that we can use to increase our student learning as aligned to our continuous improvement plan. DPI provides a bunch of resources that are available on their website, but they're also linked here. Some of the pictures that I included through this presentation are right from these resources as well. So all of these are available publicly and also in this presentation for you. So any questions about the changes, because there are a lot. And they'll have much more context once our numbers are in with them.
Any questions?
The date again is November 16th?
Yes. And we actually have a meeting tomorrow to talk about our release plan. It'll probably be a press release, an email to you guys, and then eventually at the 22nd board meeting, a presentation with all the full results. Maybe more. We'll see what tomorrow brings.
Everybody's anxious to see the numbers, I'm sure.
Yes.
All right.
There was a good presentation at the last curriculum meeting, and one of the things that was especially interesting was how, because of COVID, it's just thrown a wrench in the reporting in general. And I mean, we need to keep in mind that there were districts that didn't even have buildings open. They had kids that weren't reporting virtually, and therefore weren't included in their testing. And so it's hard to do an apples to apples comparison, but Superintendent Wimmer made a good point, and please correct me if I'm recalling your statement incorrectly, but that we do also do our own comparisons with other districts similar to ours, because we do want to know how we're doing. Mm-hmm. And this is only one of the things we use to determine that, because this is not while this is important for the Public Department of Instruction, it's not the only one that we use.
Correct. When we put out the assessment results, I believe that there were 3 different types of comparables included in that information. So looking at how did we do on the Wisconsin Forward, ACT Aspire, and ACT as compared to our county peers. Then we looked at other districts that have similar demographics as us, as far as their percentage of students that are economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, and EL. And then third, which was new this year, we compared ourselves to districts with like spending. There is like one district that meets all 3 of those different comparables, but in a humongous state with tons of districts and schools, there really isn't an apples-apples thing. When you take all of that data and put it into a report card, especially with these priority weight areas, it makes each report card extra unique. Even within our own district, across our buildings, plus our district report card, there are not 2 schools that have the exact same calculation and weighting. So it's hard to even compare, from a report card standpoint, one elementary to another. The information's good, it's usable, but again, yeah, not apples to apples.
Any other questions or comments? All right, Tina, thank you.
Right,
good stuff. We'll look forward to seeing real data next time. All right, last item under discussion. Tim Harder's going to come up, and Career and Technical Education Program of Study changes, specifically Construction Program of Study, Education in Early Childhood, as well as Computer Science and Info Technology.
All right, good evening, board members. So always exciting to come and talk about our career and tech ed programs here that we offer for our students in grades 7 through 12. As you know, we offer a pretty robust program for our students here in a variety of different programs of study. And as we talked about at the curriculum committee a week ago, our cycle of change in our courses is probably a little different than the rest of our curriculum. And so as we deal with technology and what the workforce is looking for in Washington County and Southeast Wisconsin, we often will change regularly. We're also changing to meet the needs of where our students are going next. So as you know, we have a very heavy TC credit opportunity, which is technical credit opportunity for our students here. Our last year's worth of data, we had 2,600 credits earned at $280,000 saved by the students. Those are classes that we're offering here, and when our students run out of opportunities here, then they're taking them through Start College Now or Early College through either UW Milwaukee up here in Washington County, at Moraine Park here in West Bend, or online at that point in time. So as we go through our programs of study changes, every year we look for some small items and we look for some larger overhauls to meet those workforce needs and match what maybe Moraine Park is changing in their programs of study. So this evening I have 3 different areas that we're going to briefly touch on in some areas in recommended program of study changes. The first is in construction. The easiest and minute change is we currently have our introductory course in that program of study, and a program of study is a sequence of 2 to 4 classes that our students would work through to prepare them to go into the workforce. to go on to higher ed, let it be at Moraine Park, at UW-Milwaukee, at MSOE, or any other institution, or onto an apprenticeship program after they leave us. And so our introductory course right now in our construction pathway is called Manufacturing System Woods. And so it was built around the idea that you're learning some manufacturing content and so forth and processes in there. You're just using wood as your base material. And so the team, the tech ed team, is recommending a change to introduction to woodworking. Our students often get confused when they see that word manufacturing and then they're down the hallway in the woods lab and they walk in, but I'm here to work on the metal lathe and learn CNC and automation and all that. And so we're recommending a change in the course title only. The course description stays the same at that point in time. So just a small change that would go forth after you would approve that at the next board meeting. In our second area, we're in the beginning stages of changing our program of study around education in early childhood. So our current programming is very heavy on the early childhood education opportunity. We have some phenomenal partnerships with our local businesses, the Y, our 4K classrooms here, you know, and some of our other daycares and so forth. And so our students are leaving with what's called an assistant child care teacher certification from the state. And so that is done through coursework here. It's through experiences in a co-op off-site. And as we look at those, we are matching what Moraine Park has for a program and requirements from DPI. And so the first shift that we would have in there is a course called Family and Community Relationships. It's part of that education and early childhood pathway. That course is no longer eligible for our students to receive college credit for from Moraine Park, as they've redone their pathway there. We don't allow that, or they don't allow that as a TC credited course. So we would remove that TC credit label for that, use that as an introductory class for our students in the pathway. And then at that time, there was also a requirement then that students went out and did some work-based learning experiences. And that would be me going to a 4K site and shadowing a teacher in the classroom, working at the Y daycare afterwards or another daycare, or doing some things in an early childhood classroom over at our Ralph's building in the district. So we would remove that at the same time. In working with Moraine Park to give our kids still that credit opportunity within that pathway, we would add a technical credit option to our infant and toddler development course. And so that would be equal for equal in the sense of students' credits earned in that pathway. So that would be a recommended change from the Moraine Park side of it. And then two minor tweaks to meet the state requirements for that assistant child care certification and that co-op piece, which is that kind of capstone course for our students, that work-based learning experience where they're going out there. We would update our prerequisites to match clearly what the state is asking for. They want our students who are leaving our program of study in our classes here to be at a C or higher in those core competencies. If I'm going to go out and I'm going to work for Tani's, you know, daycare business, I have to be at least a C or level higher in those core competencies to work in that environment. And so we would put right in our course description that our students would need to have that C or higher to meet those competencies, or the teacher could provide approval due to extenuating circumstances. And so with all the things that happen in our kids' lives and in the world today, we put that as an option out there for our students. And then we would just slightly update our prerequisites for that work-based learning experience around our child services co-op so that our students have all of those courses that are up there, but we're offering our kids the opportunity to take that TC infant and toddler course at the same time they're out in a co-op, so that more of our students can get to that work-based learning experience at the end of their course career. One other piece that you'll see come to the board in a year is we are starting to expand our education pathway, not just our early education or early childhood education. So we had a short discussion about that at the curriculum committee, where we're looking at partnering with one of the four-year UWs, where our students would leave with 6 college credits and some certifications towards special education aid work in the district, and provide that work-based learning experience right here inside for our district. Already having conversations with Lenny and HR and other ways of how we can bring those kids back and almost kind of create our own cycle of our own teachers coming back here in West Bend through our program. So we look to be bringing that forward next year. So any questions around early childhood and the education pathway before I jump into the last one?
I really appreciate our dedication to continuous improvement, and that as it was mentioned earlier, we're not just putting something out there and shutting the door on it and saying we're done. This is a great example of how we're always looking to improve and even just do better. Thank you.
You bet. All right, so the last area is our largest overhaul in our changes our program of study. And so within our IT program, we have two strands currently. We have a programming strand, which exists of 2 courses, and a traditional computer IT pathway, which would be your hardware, your software, your networking types of pieces. And so over the past year and a half, the business and IT department, myself, we've been looking heavily at what that means for our kids and providing them opportunities as we go forward. We know that in what are the WOW counties, which is Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Washington, we'll see a 20% increase in those jobs over the next 10-year period. And so we want to provide our students with ample learning opportunities here to set them off with that base level to go to Moraine Park, Waukesha County Technical College, through an apprenticeship, right into work, or into a 4-year degree. And so the first area that the team worked on is really our, what we call that hardware and software side of things. What most people think of the IT, the tangible part. I can work on this computer right here. I can, wire this room together. And so one of the things that we found is our IT sequence, the way it was 4 separate classes that took me 2 to 3 years to get through here. And it was just too long for our students, and we couldn't sustain that enrollment in those upper level courses. And so working with Moraine Park, we took those 4 classes and combined them down to 2. And so basically our students, we will combine 2 IT fundamentals courses down to 1, but our students will still be able to receive 6 credits from Moraine Park. We're going to take a computer hardware course and a computer software course. We're going to combine them into 1 semester, but they still earn 6 credits at that point in time. We will add a notation to the course planning guide that your outside of class homework is really what's giving you that extra time in those virtual labs and so forth, so our students meet those Moraine Park Technical College credits. We have 2 other courses that sit within that pathway. One is currently called TC to Information Technology. We would do a course name change only to TC Computer Literacy. That computer literacy course is a required course for any student who enters in Moraine Park. And so by offering that here, that's a head start for our kids as they go on to that institution. And we want to match that name so it makes sense when those kids walk in and they meet with their advisor at Moraine Park and they say, well, you have to take this course. Look, I already took that here in West Bend. I have those credits. I don't need to pay for that. I don't need to eat that time up in my schedule. And then we would remove a TC software applications course purely because they're adding at Moraine Park additional credit hours to that, and we just can't meet those requirements in a semester course here at that point in time. So that's the IT side of things for the most part. However, one of the things that the team reviewed is you see on the left-hand side, we've got a fundamentals course and we go into a hardware and software course. We found that we're missing a large aspect today of what is happening in our world of IT, and that's cybersecurity. I mean, that's a large portion of my job and my team's job, and we react to somebody clicking on a bad link every single day or a phishing email or whatever that may be, and we wanted to offer that as part of our course sequence here. And so working with the team, looking at opportunities out there of some different curriculum and so forth, we're actually going to make a recommendation to marry 2 curriculums. One being from Project Lead the Way, which I'll talk a little bit more later on, but that's a program that we already use in some other areas in the district, and Moraine Park Technical College's curriculum, and offer a year-long cybersecurity course. And so our students would walk out of there with 3 potential credits from Moraine Park and a base understanding of what cybersecurity and what that world would look like if I went into that career field at that point in time. So any questions on the computer hardware security side of things before I get into the last part?
Combining those 2 semester courses into 1 and still getting 6 credits, MPTC's cool with that?
Yep. So we had a large conversation, and really, Joel, it's that your extra time out of class, your homework, and that time in your labs is what's going to make up the difference. So if you add this up in here, and our students took all 4 of those courses in that program of study, for them, that's literally 18 credits that they walk into Moraine Park for. That's an entire semester plus done in their program at that point in time. So it will require those kids when they sign up for that course to know that when they sign up for the Moraine Park side of it, but that in essence is their homework for that course then.
Yep.
Do you know if any surrounding districts do anything like this? Because I think this is really exciting.
So they do, to the level that you articulate your courses. We are, being the larger system in the county, we offer the most articulations. I think we're the first to do some of this in depth with our cybersecurity and some of those different pieces as we go forward. So the other aspect of this that the team really talked about is the other side of IT. It's all of the computer science and the programming to make all of this work. And so we realized that we had a strand of 2 classes that weren't meeting the needs of our students and our workforce and our kids going on at that point in time. And so our recommendation is to basically start a new program of study for that going forward. And so after reviewing and looking at that employment data that I talked about in the WOW counties down here in southeast Wisconsin, looking at a variety of other different curricular products, the team is recommending the use of Project Lead the Way curriculum for a new computer science pathway. And so that curriculum is aligned to 2 sets of standards. The first one is the Computer Science Teacher Association. Their curricular standards are around very specific pieces in computer science. They align with the AP pieces, as you'll see as we go forward. And then the ISTE standards, which is the International Society for Technology and Education. We already utilize those in the district here. Project Lead the Way is something that we've been using for years. I'm actually a certified Project Lead the Way teacher in engineering, and I did that training 8 years ago. We use it at Badger Middle School in both our business and IT and our STEM classes down there. And then at the high school, we use it in our engineering and architecture areas within Tech Ed, and then our biomedical sciences in our science program. As we looked at the different curricular pieces out there, one of the things is our business and IT teachers will be the one who are being trained to go teach these courses. And so we were looking for not only a robust curriculum that was laid out and curricular resources, but also intense training to support us to provide a very high quality educational opportunity for this. And so training for each one of the courses that you'll see in our course sequence to be certified just by Project Lead the Way is a 2-week long, very intensive. It's 8 to 9 hours a day plus doing your homework at night to 4 to 5 hours. And you're part of a network then going forward around learning how to utilize that curriculum and teach that in your classroom. You're going through it as a student in a very condensed form. And so we would utilize that as we go forward in those training opportunities. The team will work with Moraine Park. We've already had our initial conversations of mapping one of the computer science courses with Project Lead the Way and what the current course sequence is for a programming course at Moraine Park. And so we hope to be able to offer those kids 3 credits out of that course also. And then it will take us 3 years to implement the program. And on the next slide, I'll show you the kind of the course sequence and where we would go. We would start with a course, our first course next school year, which would be Computer Science Essentials. It's open up to 9 through 12 up at the high school. It's a 1-semester course providing an introductory opportunity to computer science. It builds off of some of our courses that we offer at Badger Middle School in Project Lead the Way. So we have an app creators course over there currently, and it builds off of that as we go forward. The following year, we would bring in what's called AP Computer Science Principles. The nice part of when we go looking for expanding our programs of study and our pathways in CT is we are always looking for articulated credit opportunities for our students in work-based learning. So the work-based learning comes naturally through our youth apprenticeships and so forth. The Project Lead the Way curriculum will allow us to potentially offer credits at Moraine Park and allow our students to sit for the AP test both in Course 2 and Course 3. And so the third course on there is AP Computer Science A, which is a second 1-year in length course. And so our students will be able to sit for both of those exams. Course 2, their exam for AP is about 60% portfolio based, and then a written exam, and then the third one is more written exam online at that point in time. So our recommended sequence would take us 3 years to go through. As we talk about implementation for all of this, we would take our Project Lead the Way training costs. It's about $2,400 per teacher to go through that 2-week program. That's either online or face-to-face, in-person, that intensive piece, along with your follow-up trainings and so forth. We would utilize some very specific things like our Carl Perkins funding, which is a federal grant to support career and tech ed programs of study and continuous improvement around that. We would start our training this next spring and summer. So our staff would start that opportunity already out the gear. They've already had conversations with what they call a master teacher in Project Lead the Way. So a master teacher is basically somebody who has been teaching the curriculum for X number of years and is now training other teachers to do that. So they've already in contact with that gentleman. Our initial equipment costs are actually fairly low. They're less than our actual training cost overall. And so we would take that out of Carl Perkins CT incentive money, which CT incentive money is, as Tina referenced on the report card, there's an area called industry recognized credentials. So when our kids earn credentials here, we file for a grant and that money comes back to continue to support that, along with our local dollars through our normal budgeting process. Our staff will go through the process of becoming certified computer science teachers and licensed at the state level with that also, versus just teaching computer science through the business and IT side of that. So we'll work with an organization potentially out of Milwaukee on that. And then the yearly cost to have access to the curriculum for Project Lead the Way won't go up, because we currently already offer both engineering and biomedical sciences at the high school. That will take care of that. And then if the board approves this in 2 weeks, we will actually apply for a grant through Project Lead the Way that will, for us, is about the equivalent of $10,000 that will cover 4 of our teacher trainings at that point in time. So I'll answer any questions that you may have on the changes that we're bringing forth.
So I don't really have a question. I know we touched on this in curriculum, but I think it's pretty exciting to be able to train our teachers to teach computer science. I'm sure it's very difficult to find people who are trained in computer science but then also want to teach. And then what a great opportunity to develop our staff. It's a kind of a pathway for them who are maybe been teaching the same courses for a while. So I just think that's pretty exciting.
The group is really excited about the opportunity. It's a change and it's hard. It's different going back to do that, and there's a little bit of a scariness to this is outside the realm of what I went to college for, but they'll have some pretty good support through that Project Lead the Way program. All right, then we'll bring back the changes for approval at our next board meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. All right, that takes us to the future agenda items section of the agenda. So our board meeting calendar, November 22nd, regular board meeting at 5:30. Again, that will be here at City Hall. December 7th at 8 a.m., a curriculum committee meeting at the Education Service Center. And then December 13th, Monday night at 5:30, a regular board meeting. Right now, that is slated to be at ESC, or okay, so pay attention, watch the website as we come closer. We'll note the venue for that meeting on December 13th. Any items for follow-up and communication? I would like to throw one out there, following up on Monica's comments about the Clorox 360. And I don't know if,
I could speak to that now,
okay.
actually. So that was already identified as a need by the department, and Dave has already put in that order for extra devices because they couldn't chase them around the district. I know one is arriving this week and others in the following week. So
okay. So will we ultimately have one per building?
That was his intent, yes, to
Okay.
make sure that we had one per building.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Were there any supply chain issues with getting those? I would think the demand is incredibly high for machines like that.
There's supply chain issues with everything these days.
I guess my point is that it's not necessarily not that we don't desire to have more, it's that this is as fast as we can get them.
Great. Any other items for future discussion? If not, I would, how does this work? I got to read this. I would move to adjourn into executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes 19.851C to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and take any such action if necessary based on its discussion, namely compensation. Do a roll call vote on this? Okay. So then, where do let's see here. So I got the motion. Nancy seconded. Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Kurt.
Yes.
Joel Ungert.
Yes.
Tani Schmidt.
Yes.
Aaron Dove.
Yes.
Nancy Justman.
Yes.
Paul Fisher votes yes. Chris Weigert is excused. All right, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.